Hey everyone, tonight we are stepping through the paper walls of history to uncover a silhouette that has been painted over, ignored, and largely forgotten by the Western world for centuries. We're going back to the twilight of the samurai era, but we aren't looking at the men in the horned helmets. We are looking at the women who stood beside them and often, in front of them holding the line when the castle gates began to splinter. We are diving into the life of the onna-bugeisha, the female warrior of feudal Japan. It's a world of silk and steel, where a hairpin isn't just an accessory, but a last resort weapon, and where honor is heavier than any armor you could possibly wear. You probably wouldn't survive this era honestly, between the lack of antibiotics, the constant threat of earthquakes, and the rigid social hierarchy that dictates exactly how low you have to bow to avoid being beheaded. Modern life is a cakewalk. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are standing on the veranda of a sprawling wooden estate, the kind with those perfectly manicured gardens where even the moss looks like it has a dedicated maintenance schedule. The air smells of pine, rain, and the faint metallic tang of polished iron. If you look down at yourself, you might expect to see the vibrant, multi-layered kimono of a geisha, or perhaps the simple cotton robes of a rice farmer. That's the image pop culture has sold you. The demure Japanese woman of the past, shuffling quietly behind her husband, pouring tea with eyes cast downward, existing solely as a decoration in a man's world. A fragile flower in the floating world of fleeting pleasures. Whatever image you have in your head, take it, ball it up, and throw it into the koi pond. That isn't you. Not tonight. Tonight, you belong to the buke-classed warrior families. While you certainly know how to pour tea without spilling a drop, which is harder than it looks when wearing 12 pounds of silk, your hands are calloused in very specific places. Not from needlework, but from the friction of a wooden shaft sliding through your palms thousands of times a day. You are an onna-bugeisha. It's a term that literally translates to female warrior. And contrary to what Hollywood movies featuring Tom Cruise might suggest, you are not an anomaly. You are on some rebellious teenager, cutting her hair to pretend to be a boy so she can sneak into the army. You don't need a disguise. Your grandmother fought, her grandmother fought, and if the gods are kind or cruel, depending on your perspective, you will fight too. The existence of women like you is one of history's best-kept secrets. Mostly because later historians in the 19th and 20th centuries got a bit squeamish about the idea of mothers and daughters lopping off heads. They preferred the narrative of the supportive wife waiting at home. But the earth doesn't lie. Here is a mainstream historical fact for you to chew on. Battlefield excavations from the Battle of Senbin Matsubaru in 1580 turned up a startling secret. When they ran DNA tests on the remains found on that battlefield, they discovered that 35 out of 105 bodies were female. That is literally 1/3 of the combat force. These weren't civilians caught in the crossfire. These were bodies found in the thick of the formation, armed and armored. It suggests that for centuries, women were fighting and dying on the front lines in numbers that would make a Spartan blush. So, clear your mind of the damsel archetype. You are walking through the wooden corridors of your family's estate. The floorboards specifically designed to chirp like nightingales to warn you of intruders in ancient Japan's version of a squeaky ADT security system. The atmosphere is heavy. It is the mid-19th century. The Edo period is in its final gasping breaths, and the world is changing. But your training remains rooted in a tradition that goes back 1,000 years. You feel the weight of expectation pressing down on your shoulders, heavier than the elaborate wig you have to wear for formal occasions. Being a woman of the samurai class is a balancing act that would make a circus acrobat sweat. On one hand, you are expected to be the epitome of grace, education, and domestic management. You must know poetry, flower arranging, and the complex rituals of social etiquette. On the other hand, you are the last line of defense. If the men ride out to war and the castle is attacked, nobody is coming to save you. You are the cavalry. It's a strange duality. Imagine training to kill a man with a single stroke of a glaive in the morning, and then spending your afternoon stressing over whether your calligraphy brushstrokes are emotionally expressive enough. Talk about a split personality. Historians still argue whether the onna-bugeisha should be classified as samurai in the strict political sense. Technically, only men could hold the title and the stipend that came with it. Women were formerly called bukanuna, women of warrior families. But let's be real, if you are wearing armor, holding a spear, and defending a fortress, arguing about your job title seems a bit redundant. It's like arguing with a bear about whether it's technically an omnivore or a carnivore while it's eating you. The distinction doesn't matter much when the arrows start flying. As you walk through the estate, you catch your reflection in a polished bronze mirror. You might notice your teeth. In this era, there's a fringe fashion trend called ohaguro, where women blacken their teeth with a mixture of iron filings and vinegar. Yes, you heard that right, iron filings and vinegar. It smells exactly as terrible as you imagine, like licking a rusty battery. The goal is to look beautiful and mature. But there's a secondary theory that blackened teeth make a warrior look more fearsome, like a demon who has chewed through iron. Plus, it effectively hides your fear. Nobody can see you gritting your teeth if your smile is already a void of darkness. It's beauty, intimidation, and a poker face all rolled into one full-tasting package. The sun is setting over the castle town below. The era of peace, which has lasted for over 200 years, has made many of the men in your class soft. They have become bureaucrats, administrators, poets who carry swords they've never drawn. But in the women's quarters, the memory of the old ways is preserved with a fierce intensity. You aren't allowed to be soft. The men might have the luxury of politics, but women have the reality of survival. You sit on the tatami mat, feeling the texture of the woven rushes under your knees. Your legs go numb after 20 minutes, but you don't move. You wouldn't dare. Discipline is the air you breathe. You are waiting for the signal, the shift in the wind that says the long summer of peace is over. You don't know it yet, but you are about to be thrust into one of the most violent civil wars in your nation's history. The floating world of geishas and kabuki plays is about to burn down, and from the ashes you will have to rise. Not as a wife or a daughter, but as a demon of the castle ramparts. But before the fire, there is the forging. Before you can hold the line, you must be born into the code. The journey of the onna-bugeisha doesn't begin on the battlefield. It begins in the cradle, with the very first lesson your mother whispers into your ear, while the rest of the world thinks you are just playing with dolls. You are 6 years old, and you are already carrying a weapon. It's tucked snugly into the folds of your obi, the wide silk sash that keeps your kimono from falling open and embarrassing the entire clan. To the outside observer, you look like a porcelain doll, a tiny figure in bright floral patterns, hair pinned up with ornaments that jingle softly when you run. But if you were to trip and fall, you wouldn't just scrape a knee. You might accidentally puncture a lung. The weapon is a keikon, a short dagger about 6 to 10 inches long, specifically designed for close-quarters combat and, more grimly, for ritual suicide. Most modern 6-year-olds can't be trusted with a pair of safety scissors without supervision. Yet here you are, walking around with razor-sharp steel pressed against your ribs. Growing up in a samurai household isn't like growing up in a normal family. There are no participation trophies, and gentle parenting is a concept that won't be invented for another century and a half. In your world, discipline is the only love language anyone speaks. You wake up before the sun. You learn to walk without making a sound, sliding your feet in a way that keeps your center of gravity low and steady. This is called suriashi, or sliding feet, and it's critical because lifting your feet makes you vulnerable to being knocked over. Plus, it saves the floor polish. Your education is a rigorous mix of high culture and cold-blooded pragmatism. By the time you are 10, you can probably recite the classic Hyakunin Ishua collection of 100 poems by 100 poets from memory. You understand the subtle metaphors of cherry blossoms falling, which represents the transience of life, obviously, and the longing of separated lovers. But in the same afternoon, you are taught the anatomy of the human neck. You learn exactly where the carotid artery sits and how much pressure it takes to sever it. It is a curriculum that bounces between how to appreciate the moon and how to bleed out efficiently. This brings us to the kakon in your sash. It wasn't given to you to peel apples. It was a gift, likely from your mother or grandmother, presented with a gravity that terrified you at the time. This dagger is your guardian sword, or Mamorgatana. A mainstream historical fact that often gets glossed over is that every woman of the samurai class carried one of these constantly. It was as essential as a smartphone is today. But instead of doom scrolling, it was for doom prevention. You slept with it under your pillow. You took it to the bath. If you were getting married, it was one of the primary gifts you took to your husband's home. Not exactly a toaster oven, is it? The training on how to use this dagger is where things get dark, so brace yourself. You aren't really taught defense with it. You are taught how to defend your honor. In the worst-case scenario, if the castle is overrun, if capture is imminent. If you are about to be subjected to unspeakable violence, the kaken is your exit strategy. You are drilled on how to cut your own throat, specifically targeting the jugular vein, to ensure a quick death. You are even taught to tie your knees together with a sash beforehand, so that when you die, your body doesn't sprawl out in an undignified way during the convulsions. It's heavy stuff for a kid who just wants to go outside and catch fireflies. It puts a whole new spin on the phrase, act like a lady. Despite this morbid training, your childhood isn't devoid of fun. The fun is just ... weirdly intense. You play card games like Karuta, which requires lightning-fast reflexes and memorization, effectively training your brain for split-second battlefield decisions. You play with tamari balls, beautiful embroidered spheres made from wadded-up kimono scraps. There is a quirky, fringe historical detail about these balls in some spy-heavy periods of Japanese history. Tamari balls were used to smuggle secret messages or even valuable coins across enemy lines, hidden deep inside the tightly wound threads. So even your game of catch might technically be an act of treason or espionage. Your primary instructor in all of this is your mother. In the West, we often think of the samurai father as the stern taskmaster, but in the domestic sphere, the mother is the general. The father is often away on official duty, hanging out with the daimyo, the feudal lord, or managing the estate's finances. The mother runs the house. She manages the servants, the budget, and the education of the children. She is the one who inspects your handwriting and your posture. She is the one who tells you stories of Hangaku Gozen, the legendary female warrior who laid waste to entire armies in the 12th century. There is an ongoing scholarly debate amongst historians about the nature of this maternal relationship. Some argue that these samurai mothers were ruthless agents of the patriarchy, enforcing the strict social codes even more harshly than the men did to ensure the survival of the clan. Others argue that they were subversively empowering their daughters, giving them the tools to be self-reliant in a society that legally viewed them as property. It's the Tiger Mom argument, but with literal swords. Was she breaking your spirit or forging it? Probably a bit of both. You look at your brother, who is maybe a year older. He is being trained to ride horses and shoot arrows. He gets the glory, he gets the title, you get the domestic duties and the hidden dagger. It feels unfair, and honestly, it is. But there is a different kind of steel being tempered in you. The men are taught to seek death in battle to gain honor for their lord. You are taught to protect the home at all costs. His war is offensive, yours is defensive. And as anyone who follows sports knows, offense sells tickets, but defense wins championships. The house itself is a training ground. You learn to navigate the complex social hierarchy of the clan. You learn that bowing a few degrees too shallow to a superior is a massive insult, while bowing too deep to an inferior is embarrassing. It's a minefield of etiquette. You learn to read the erkuki wo yomu. You have to anticipate needs before they are spoken. If your father has to ask for his tea, you've already failed. This hyper-awareness of your surroundings, this constant scanning of the environment, is actually excellent training for a warrior. You are learning situational awareness without ever stepping onto a battlefield. As you grow, the kaken starts to feel less like a heavy foreign object and more like an extension of your body. You stop noticing the weight in your obi, just like you stop noticing the weight of your hair ornaments. It becomes a part of your silhouette. You are a daughter of the blade, living in a house made of paper and wood, waiting for the spark that will burn it all down. But you won't just be sitting there with a fan when the fire comes. You have something else in your arsenal, something much bigger than a dagger, and you're about to start training with it. It's time to step out into the courtyard and pick up the weapon that will define your class, the naginata. So, you've got your hidden dagger, your keikan, tucked safely in your sash. That's your last resort, the break glass in case of emergency option. But the goal of any good warrior is to make sure the emergency never gets close enough to grab you. For that, you need reach, you need leverage, you need a weapon that screams, "Stay off my lawn," but with significantly more lethality than a grumpy neighbor waving a rake. Enter the naginata. You step out into the training yard. the dirt packed hard by generations of feet sliding and stomping in unison. Your instructor, often an older female relative or a hired martial arts master, hands you a wooden practice weapon. It's heavy. A naginata is essentially a glaive, a curved, single-edged sword blade mounted on a long wooden shaft. The shaft is usually about 5 to 7 feet long, and the blade adds another 1 or 2 feet. Standing next to it, the weapon is significantly taller than you are. It looks like someone took a samurai sword and put it on a selfie stick designed for giants. This is the great equalizer. This is how a woman standing 5 foot nothing can go toe-to-toe with a 6-foot man, armor-plated like a tank, and win. It's all about physics. You don't need biceps the size of grapefruits to use this thing. You need to understand full. By holding the shaft near the bottom and swinging the blade in a wide arc, you generate a tremendous amount of centrifugal force. Even a light tap at the end of that swing hits with the impact of a sledgehammer. It's the difference between trying to push a door open near the hinges versus pushing it at the handle. The naginata turns you into a whirlwind of leverage. Here is a mainstream historical fact for your file. During the Edo period, the naginata became the iconic symbol of the female warrior. So much so that schools of naginata jutsu, the art of wielding the naginata, flourished specifically for women. While men were obsessing over their katanas, which, let's be honest, are just phallic symbols made of folded steel, women were mastering the art of keeping those men at a humiliating distance. If a swordsman can't get within 3 feet of you without losing a limb, his fancy sword skills are about as useful as a chocolate teapot. Your training begins with the stance. You drop your hips, knees bent, back straight. If you've ever done a bar class or held a squat until your legs shook, you have a rough idea of the starting position. Now, imagine holding that position for 2 hours while swinging a heavy oak pole. You learn to slide your hands along the shaft, changing the length of your reach in a split second. One moment you are fighting at close range, the shaft protecting your body like a shield. The next, you slide your hands together and extend the blade 7 feet out to slice through a shin or a horse's tendon. And that's a key point. You aren't aiming for the head, usually. You're aiming for the legs. The naginata is a mower. In the chaos of battle, taking out an enemy's legs is just as effective as killing them. If they can't stand, they can't fight. Plus, samurai armor had notoriously weak spots around the inner thighs and groin. Gentlemen, you might want to cross your legs right about now. The naginata was designed to sweep low and slice upward into those vulnerable gaps. It's brutal, pragmatic, and incredibly effective. But don't think this is just mindless hacking. The choreography of Nagintu Jutsu is beautiful, almost dance-like. You learn to spin the weapon around your body, using the momentum of one strike to power the next. You switch sides, spinning the shaft behind your back, creating a zone of death that surrounds you 360 degrees. It's like baton twirling, if the baton could decapitate a horse. Speaking of horses, here is a quirky fringe tidbit. In some regions, the naginata wasn't just a weapon, it was a dowry requirement. A samurai daughter couldn't get married unless she could prove proficiency with a spear. Imagine that prenup conversation. Yes, she comes with a substantial amount of silk, some excellent tea sets, and the ability to defend the perimeter against a cavalry charge. It certainly sets a tone for the marriage. If you argue with your wife, remember, she knows how to disembowel a charger at 20 paces. You spend hours hitting the makiwara, a straw-padded striking post. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Your hands blister, peel, and callus over. Your shoulders burn. You learn the specific cuts, the men head, the do torso, the suni shins. You also learn the ishizuki, the metal cap at the butt end of the shaft. It's not just a counterweight, it's a blunt instrument. If an enemy gets past the blade, you jam the butt end into their solar plexus or smash it into their face. The naginata has no safe end. It's dangerous from top to bottom. Historians still argue whether the shift to the naginata as a women's weapon was a form of empowerment or a way to segregate women from the soul of the samurai, the katana. By the Medo period, swords were increasingly seen as the exclusive domain of men. Did pushing women toward the naginata marginalize them, or did it actually give them a tactical advantage, since most men were trained to fight other swordsmen, not someone wielding a 7-foot pole? It's the classic Batman versus Superman debate of feudal weaponry. A sword is great, but range is king. By mastering the naginata, women were effectively hard countering the meta of the time. As you train, you also learn the mental state of Zanchina remaining mind. It means you don't relax after you strike. You don't admire your handiwork. You strike, and immediately you are ready for the next threat. Your eyes are wide, your breathing controlled. You are scanning for the next attacker before the first one hits the ground. In a castle siege, you won't be fighting a duel. You'll be fighting a mob. Zanshin is the difference between killing one enemy and surviving 10. The sun beats down on the training yard. You are sweating through your robes, and your hair is sticking to your neck. You are exhausted, but you feel a strange sense of power. The naginata is an extension of your will. It transforms you from a potential victim into a fortress. When you hold it, you aren't just a girl in a kimono. You are a radius of inviolable space. But mastering the weapon is only half the battle. You can have the best technique in the world, but if you get winded after 30 seconds of combat, you're dead. The armor you will eventually wear weighs upwards of 40 pounds. The naginata itself is heavy. To fight effectively, you need a level of physical fitness that would make a modern CrossFit athlete weep into their protein shake. You need stamina. You need explosive power. And unfortunately for you, the only way to get that is to wake up while the demons are still sleeping and put your body through hell. The only thing harder than swinging a 7-foot spear for hours is doing it while wearing the equivalent of a small child strapped to your chest. This is where the romance of the warrior lifestyle usually hits a brick wall for most people. We love the idea of the sword fight, the flashing steel, the dramatic pauses, the wind blowing through the hair. We rarely think about the cardio. But in your world, cardio isn't just about fitting into a smaller kimono, it's about not dying of exhaustion 10 minutes into a siege. Your day begins in the hour of the tiger, which is roughly 4 a.m. The sun isn't up, the roosters aren't even up. The only things awake are you, the castle guards, and your regrets. You slide out from under your heavy quilts, leaving the warmth behind, and step onto the freezing wooden floor. There is no hitting the snooze button. There is no leisurely scroll through social media to wake up your brain. There is only the cold reality of the dojo floor and the morning mist. You dress quickly in loose training trousers, tying back your sleeves with a tasuki cord to keep them out of the way. Today is a conditioning day. Before you pick up a weapon, you have to build the engine that drives it. You step outside, and the air is so crisp it feels like inhaling shattered glass. You start running. You aren't running on a rubberized track or a treadmill. You are running on uneven dirt paths, up stone staircases, and through the wooded perimeter of the estate. This is high-intensity interval training, 19th century style. You aren't just jogging. You are training for explosiveness. You sprint up the steep stone steps leading to the shrine, thigh muscles burning, lungs screaming for oxygen. Then you descend with controlled, silent steps, practicing that low center of gravity we talked about earlier. If you stumble, you do it again. If you breathe too loudly, you do it again. The goal is to move like a ghost, but a ghost with iron quads. Here is a mainstream historical fact. Samurai conditioning was distinct from the physical culture of the West because it emphasized the tendon, the center of energy, located just below the navel. While Western knights might focus on upper body strength to swing heavy broadswords, Japanese martial arts focused on the core and the hips. All your power comes from the ground up. So, your morning routine involves endless squats, shiko, similar to what sumo wrestlers do. You stomp the ground, driving the bad spirits away and driving lactic acid into your legs. You do hundreds of them. By the time the sun actually breaks the horizon, your legs feel like jelly, but they are turning into tree trunks. To up the ante, your instructor introduces you to tetsujeta. These are traditional wooden sandals, but instead of wood, they are made of solid iron. They can weigh anywhere from 3 to 10 pounds each. You strap these torture devices to your feet and practice your forms. It's like wearing ankle weights, but significantly more awkward and prone to crushing your toes if you lose focus. You have to lift your knees high, stepping deliberately. When you finally take them off, you feel like you can jump over the castle walls. It's a primitive form of resistance training that builds the kind of deceptively strong legs required to hold a deep stance while a fully armored man crashes into you. But the physical pain is only half the equation. The mental shock is next. You head to the well or a nearby stream for Mizagi cold water purification. This is the part where you probably wouldn't survive, or at least you'd strongly reconsider your life choices. You strip down to a simple white loincloth or robe, stand on the freezing ground and pour buckets of ice-cold water over your head. In the dead of winter, it's not just about hygiene though, that's a bonus. It's about shocking the nervous system. It forces you to control your involuntary gasp reflex. You have to breathe through the shock. Ibuki breathing is the technica, hard forced exhalation that tightens every muscle in your body and creates a shield of internal pressure. You scream silently with your breath, turning the freezing cold into a focused heat in your belly. It wakes you up more effectively than a triple-shot espresso ever could. It teaches you that discomfort is just a signal from your brain, and signals can be ignored. Historians still argue whether the intensity of this physical training was universal for all women of the samurai class, or if it was reserved for those in specific regions prone to conflict, like the Aizu domain. Some suggest that for many women in the peaceful Edo period, the training became more performative a dance rather than a combat drill. But in the lineage you belong to, the performative theory is an insult. You aren't dancing, you are preparing for the worst day of your life. After the water and the weights, you move to the saburo-â heavy wooden practice sword that is thicker and heavier than a real blade. You swing it again and again and again. Saburi is the practice of repetitive cuts. You might do 500, maybe 1,000 cuts before breakfast. The repetition is designed to bypass your conscious brain. In a fight, you don't have time to think, okay, now I need to raise my arms and pivot. Your body has to just do it. You are programming your muscle memory, etching the movement into your nervous system until swinging a weapon is as natural as blinking. There is a quirky fringe tidbit about diet here that you might find interesting. During these intense training periods, some strict traditionalists avoided meat, believing it tainted the blood and spirit influenced by Buddhist precepts. Instead, you are fueled by brown rice, which has more nutrients than the polished white rice the city slickers eat, pickled vegetables, and miso soup. But there's a rumor of folk belief that eating the meat of a powerful animal, like a wild boar or a bear, transfers its strength to you. While officially frowned upon in polite society, many a warrior family had medicinal stews that were suspiciously meaty during hard winters. You eat quickly, in silence, treating the food as fuel, not a culinary experience. By the time the rest of the household is stirring, you have already run miles, frozen yourself half to death, and swung a heavy club 1,000 times. You are awake in a way that most people never experience a hyperlucide state of physical activation. Your skin is tingling, your blood is pumping, and your mind is clear. But now comes the hard shift. You have to turn it off. You have to wipe the sweat away, put on the silk robes, fix your hair, and walk into the main hall, as if you have just been training to be a killing machine. You have to transition from the hour of the tiger to the hour of the tea ceremony. The warrior must recede, and the cultured lady must step forward. It's a psychological gear shift that grinds at your soul, but it is necessary. Because in your world, the brush is just as mighty as the sword, and you are expected to master that too. So, you leave the dojo, the smell of sweat and iron lingering faintly on your skin, and head toward the study. The physical grinding is done. Now the mental grinding begins. You swap the heavy wooden sword for a delicate bamboo brush, but don't be fooled. The precision required for what comes next is just as demanding, and the stakes, in a social sense, are just as high. You have scrubbed the sweat from your skin, changed out of your training trousers, and donned the formal kimono that restricts your movement in a way that feels like a silk straitjacket. You enter the study, a room that smells of old paper, cedarwood, and the distinct earthy scent of sumi ink. You sink to your knees onto the tatami mat in the seiza position. If you thought the squats were bad, seiza is the silent killer. You are folding your legs underneath you, cutting off circulation to your feet until they feel like blocks of ice. All while maintaining a spine so straight, you could use it as a ruler. This is the other half of your existence. This is Bunbu Ryodo, the dual path of the pen and the sword. To be a true warrior in the samurai tradition, you cannot just be a brute who knows how to hit things with a stick. You must be cultured. You must be literate. You must be able to compose a death poem that is poignant enough to make your enemies weep before you slice them open. It's a high bar. Imagine if modern special forces soldiers were also required to publish a critically acclaimed volume of sonnets before they could deploy. That is your life. You reach for the ink stick and begin to grind it against the stone, scissori with a little water. This motion circular, rhythmic, hypnotic is a form of meditation. It calms the heart rate you just spiked during your morning sprint. You pick up the brush, the tip is fine, delicate. You are about to practice shodo, the way of calligraphy. Here is the thing about Japanese calligraphy, it is unforgiving. You use rice paper, which is incredibly absorbent. Once the brush touches the paper, the ink flows instantly. You cannot hesitate. You cannot correct a mistake. You cannot hit undo. The stroke must be executed with total commitment and fluid confidence. If your mind wavers, the line wavers. If you are fearful, the character looks weak. In this way, the brush is exactly like the sword. A hesitant cut with a sword gets you killed. A hesitant stroke with a brush gets you scolded by your tutor, which, depending on the tutor, might feel emotionally equivalent to death. You practice the character for nothingness or void moon. It requires a balance of black ink and white space. You are learning spatial awareness on a micro scale. You are learning to impose your will on the paper. It's mental toughness training disguised as art class. Next, you move to ikebana, the art of flower arranging. Now, I know what you're thinking. I'm supposed to be a warrior. Why am I fussing over chrysanthemums? You probably think this is just busy work to keep you docile. But look closer. Ikebana isn't just shoving flowers in a vase. It is a structural discipline based on the triad of heaven, earth, and man. You have to create harmony through asymmetry. You have to trim the excess, removing the leaves and branches that clutter the form. Does that sound familiar? It's the same principle as strategy. You identify the core strength, the main stem, you support it with auxiliaries, and you cut away the weakness. You are learning to organize chaos into order. Here's a quirky fringe tidbit for you. Historically, some ninja and intelligence networks used flower arrangements as a form of dead-drop communication or signaling. A specific flower placed at a specific angle in the tokonoma, the display alcove, could signal to a guest that the meeting is safe, or we are being watched, or the mission is compromised. So, while you are arranging those irises, you might actually be learning the basics of encryption. It gives a whole new meaning to say it with flowers. From the artistic, you pivot to the academic. You pull out the scrolls. You are expected to know the classics Confucius, the tale of Genji Boot, because you are of the samurai class. Your reading list is a bit more aggressive. You study the Haihu, the strategy of war. You read Sun Tzu's The Art of War and Miyamoto Musashi's The Book of Five Rings. Historians still argue whether women were formally taught military strategy in the same way men were, or if they simply absorbed it through the necessity of running the household. The prevailing theory now is that while men studied offensive grand strategy, how to move armies across a map, women were the masters of defensive logistics. Think about it. Your father or husband might lead the army, but who manages the castle when he's gone? You do. You are the CEO of a fortress. You need to know exactly how much rice is in the storehouse and how many days it will last if 500 refugees flood the gates. You need to know the water supply levels. You need to know how to organize the servants into fire brigades. This isn't home economics in the sense of baking cookies. This is quartermaster logistics. A castle that runs out of food falls just as surely as one that gets knocked down. You are learning that an army marches on its stomach, and you are the one holding the ladle. You study the maps of the local terrain. You learn the choke points. You learn where the river floods in the spring, and where the forest is dense enough to hide an ambush. You aren't just looking at a landscape. You are looking at a kill zone. This duality is the essence of your existence. You can look at a bamboo grove and see the poetic beauty of its resilience in the wind, and simultaneously calculate how many spear shafts you could harvest from it in an emergency. It's a strange mental space to occupy. You are shifting gears constantly. One minute, you are contemplating the impermanence of the morning glory flower, and the next, you are calculating the trajectory of an arrow fired from the ramparts. It makes you sharp, adaptable. It prevents you from becoming a one-dimensional thug. But there is a danger here too. The floating world of arts and culture is seductive. It's easy to get lost in the poetry and forget the steel. The Edo period has been peaceful for so long that many in your class have forgotten the bu martial and focused entirely on the bun civil. They've become soft, bureaucratic, obsessed with tea ceremony etiquette, while their swords rust in their scabbards. You cannot afford that luxury. Your mother ensures you don't. If your calligraphy is sloppy, she corrects it. If your strategic assessment of the grain supply is off by a bushel, she corrects it. She reminds you that culture is the armor of the mind, but it doesn't stop a bullet. You are building a citadel inside your head, brick by brick, scroll by scroll, as the afternoon light begins to fade, casting long shadows across the tatami mats. Your legs finally numb to the point where you do unfeel the pain of forcesâ anymore, mostly because you unfeel your legs at all. You bow to your tutor, dismiss yourself, and wobble slightly as the blood rushes back into your lower extremities. You have trained the body, and you have trained the mind. Now, you must learn the ground. The sun is dipping below the horizon, and the castle complex is changing. Shadows are stretching out, hiding corners and corridors. It's time to leave the study and walk the perimeter. You need to know this building better than you know your own reflection. You need to know every squeaky board, every hidden panel, and every line of sight. Because when the enemy comes and they will come, this house won't be a home anymore. It will be a weapon, and you need to know how to trigger it. The sun has fully set now, and the estate has transformed. By day, the castle is a symbol of administrative power and elegant living, a place where bureaucrats shuffle papers and tea kettles whistle. But by night, the shadows strip away the polite veneer, revealing the building's true purpose. It is a machine designed to kill people who aren't invited. And tonight, you are walking through the belly of the beast, memorizing its teeth. You carry a paper lantern, the candlelight flickering against the walls. You aren't just taking a stroll, you are inspecting the grid. Your home is not designed for comfort, it's designed for paranoia. If you've ever complained about the open concept layout of a modern apartment, you would absolutely hate a Japanese castle. It is a labyrinth of zigzagging corridors, blind corners, and sudden elevation changes. This isn't bad architecture, it's tactical genius. You walk toward the main entrance complex, the Tossaka. Here is a mainstream historical fact for you. Japanese castle gates were almost never built in a straight line. They were designed as square courtyards with two gates set at a 90-degree angle to each other. The enemy smashes through the first gate and rushes in, thinking they've won, only to find themselves trapped in a small, walled box with the second gate still shut tight. Meanwhile, your archers are lined up on the walls above, looking down into this kill box like kids looking into an aquarium. Except instead of fish food, they're dropping arrows and heavy stones. It's the ultimate welcome mat for unwanted guests. Inside the residence itself, you navigate hallways that seem to shrink. The ceilings are low, claustrophobically so in some areas. This serves two purposes. It retains heat in the winter, and it makes it incredibly difficult for an intruder to swing a long sword katana over his head. If an enemy breaks in, he's forced to stab or slash horizontally, limiting his combat effectiveness. You, however, with your shorter cake and dagger or a shorter polearm, have the advantage. It's home field advantage, weaponized to the inch. As you climb the stairs to the upper levels, your thighs burn. These aren't the gentle, OSHA-compliant staircases you find in an office building. These are basically ladders with an attitude problem. They are steep, often rising at a 50 or 60-degree angle with narrow treads. Now, imagine climbing these while wearing armor and being shot at. If an attacker trips which, he clogs the path for everyone behind him. It's a bottleneck system that turns a rushing mob into a slow, clumsy conga line of targets. You reach the tenshu, the main keep that towers over the complex. It's dark, dusty, and cold. Historians still argue whether the great lords actually lived in these massive keeps, or if they were purely symbolic storehouses used only during sieges. The current consensus leans toward the latter. Living in a drafty, 5-story wooden tower with no plumbing wasn't exactly luxurious, even for a daimyo. Most lords lived in the comfortable single-story palace at the base. The keep was the panic room. It was the Alamo, and it's where you will retreat when the outer walls fall. You run your hand along the wooden walls. They are thick, plastered with fire-resistant clay, but there are secrets here. You stop at a nondescript section of the wall and press a hidden latch. A panel slides back. It's a kakashibaya, a hidden room, or sometimes a kakashikaden, a hidden staircase concealed inside what looks like a storage closet. These were escape routes or ambush points. You check the supplies stashed inside: dried rice, water jars, gunpowder. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit that sounds like it belongs in a cartoon, but was very real. Some castles utilized squeaking floorboards intentionally, which we touched on, but others had crashing floors. In certain hallways, the floorboards were not nailed down, but were balanced on a pivot. If you stepped in the center, it was fine. If you stepped on the edge, like an unfamiliar intruder hugging the wall, the board would flip or collapse, dumping the unfortunate soul into a pit or a lower level. It's like a medieval version of the show Wipeout, but with sharpened bamboo stakes at the bottom instead of water. You move to the windows. They aren't glass. They are wooden slats or small rectangular openings. You open one and look down. Directly beneath the window, the stone wall flares out in a beautiful curve known as mushigeshi, or warrior repellent. The curve makes the wall nearly impossible to climb. But look at the floor of the window bay itself. There is a removable section of wood. This is an ishi-otoshi, literally a stone-dropping chute. In Western castles, these were called murder holes, and people always assumed they were for pouring boiling oil. But oil was expensive and hard to heat up in a hurry. In Japan, you dropped rocks, big, heavy, jagged rocks, or you poured boiling water, or, if you were feeling particularly nasty, sand. Hot sand gets into the armor, into the eyes, into the clothes. It causes itching, blindness, and panic. It's low-tech, cheap, and horrifyingly effective. You check the pile of fist-sized stones stacked neatly next to the window. They are your ammunition. You continue your patrol, checking the onna-bugeisha sharp, metal spikes or angled wooden stakes placed at the tops of walls and gates to prevent ninjas or just athletic thieves from climbing over. The castle is bristling with sharp edges. Even the decorative transoms above the sliding doors often have hidden spaces where a spear can be thrust through to stab someone in the next room. It's a sobering realization. You grew up playing hide-and-seek in these halls. You have fond memories of chasing your brother through the courtyard. But tonight, viewing it through the lens of your training, you see the house for what it really is, a giant, intricate weapon. Every beam, every floorboard, every angle is calculated to maximize suffering for anyone trying to take it from you. And you are the operator of this machine. You know which floorboard squeaks. You know which stair is loose. You know that if you run down the east corridor, you have to duck your head at the third beam or you'll knock yourself out. An invader doesn't know that. That knowledge is worth 10 men. You finish your loop and stand on the highest balcony, looking out over the town below. The lights of the commoners' houses are twinkling. They are sleeping, safe in the knowledge that the castle on the hill is watching over them. They do not know that the watchers include a woman with a dagger in her sash who knows exactly how to drop a rock on a man's head from 40 feet up. The wind picks up, rattling the heavy wooden shutters. It sounds like distant thunder, or perhaps distant cannons. The peace of the Edo period is fraying. The rumors from the capital are getting worse. The blueprint of the castle is etched into your mind, but soon you won't just be walking it, you'll be defending it. And to do that, you need more than just a map and a spear. You need a code. You need a philosophy that tells you why you are standing here in the cold, waiting to die. You need to understand the soul of the warrior class, and contrary to popular belief, it wasn't written just for men. You step back inside from the cold balcony, sliding the heavy wooden door shut and latching it. The physical chill is gone, replaced by the warmth of the brazier. But a different kind of cold settles in your stomach. You have the castle blueprint memorized. You have the naginata skills to defend it. But hardware is useless without software. And the operating system you are running on is one of the most demanding, bug-ridden, and crash-prone philosophies ever invented: Bushido. Now, if you ask the average person on the street what Bushido is, they'll probably mutter something about honor, loyalty, and maybe that scene from The Last Samurai where everyone looks very stoic while being shot at. And they aren't entirely wrong. But for you, a woman of the samurai class, the code hits different. It isn't just about death before dishonor. It's about the specific, suffocating weight of duty that dictates your every breath. You sit down near the fire, pulling a small, bound book from your sleeve. It might be a copy of the onna-bugeisha, the Greater Learning for Women, a text that basically serves as the user manual for being a subservient wife. It preaches the 3 obediences: obedience to your father when young, to your husband when married, and to your son when old. It sounds delightful, doesn't it? Like a lifetime subscription to being a second-class citizen. But here is where the reality gets complicated. While the text says obey, the subtext says endure. For the onna-bugeisha, Bushido is refined into a concept called gamen endurance, patience, and perseverance in the face of the unbearable. Your husband's duty is to the lord, the daimyo. Your duty is to the house, the ie. If the lord orders your husband to die, he dies. If the house is threatened, you kill. It's a hierarchy of sacrifice. You are the designated survivor until you aren't. Here is a mainstream historical fact to ground this. The famous text Hangaku, often cited as the Bible of Bushido, famously states, "The way of the warrior is found in death." It argues that a samurai must live as if they are already dead, freeing them from the fear of dying. For women, this translated into a constant readiness for self-sacrifice, not for glory, but to avoid becoming a burden or a pawn. You weren't seeking a glorious death on the battlefield to be sung about in poems. You were seeking a clean death to ensure your husband did not hesitate in battle, because he was worried about you being taken hostage. Talk about a guilt trip. Honey, have a great day at the war. I'll just be here preparing my ritual suicide so you can focus. This brings us to the fringe, slightly terrifying tidbit of the night. There are recorded instances of samurai wives who, upon realizing their husbands were wavering in their loyalty or courage because of their attachment to their families, would proactively kill themselves to free the husband from his earthly tether. It's the ultimate, grim, I'm doing this for you move. There's a story of the wife of a specific retainer who, hearing her husband might surrender to save her, wrote a poem, adjusted her robes, and ended her life just to remove his leverage. It makes modern relationship drama look incredibly petty. Oh, you forgot our anniversary? Well, at least you didn't commit ritual suicide to help me focus on my quarterly review. However, historians still argue whether Bushido as a codified universal system actually existed in the way we think. It did during the feudal era, or if it was largely a romantic invention of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, specifically by a guy named Nitobe Inazo. Some scholars suggest that real samurai were much more pragmatic, flipping allegiances when the pay was better, and that this rigid death cult idea was retroactively applied to make them look cooler and more nationalistic. But whether it was an ancient code or a retro trend, by the mid-19th century, you believe it. Your grandmother believed it, and that belief is what matters. The code demands that you repress all outward emotion. This is why you were taught to blacken your teeth and shave your eyebrows to create a mask. If you are terrified, you show nothing. If you are heartbroken, you show nothing. It's the world's most intense poker face. You are taught that tears are a betrayal of your class. If a loved one dies, you do not weep. You praise their valor. It's emotional repression weaponized into a virtue. But there is a crack in the armor. You are human. Beneath the layers of silk and the indoctrination, you feel fear. You feel love. The tragedy of the onna-bugeisha isn't that they were killing machines. It's that they were mothers, daughters, and lovers who were forced to suppress their humanity to survive. The code tells you that your life is lighter than a feather compared to your duty. But when you look at your children sleeping on the futon, their lives feel heavier than the mountain. The honor you are protecting is also specifically gendered. For a man, losing honor means fleeing battle or failing a mission. For a woman, losing honor often meant violation. The fear of sexual violence in war was the driving force behind many of the grim rituals we touched on. The code wasn't just about pride, it was a desperate, pre-planned response to the reality of what happens when a city falls. You aren't guarding your reputation. You are guarding your autonomy. The choice to die by your own hand is the final tragic claim to power in a world that wants to take it from you. You stand up and pace the room. The three obediences feel flimsy now. If the enemy breaches the gate, you won't be obeying your father who is too old to fight, or your husband who is at the front, or your son who is a child. You will be the commander-in-chief of the home front. The code might say, you are a follower, but the naginata in the corner says you are the leader. This disconnect between the theory of female subservience and the reality of female strength is the central tension of your life. You are told you are weak, yet you are trained to be strong. You are told to follow, yet prepared to lead. It's gaslighting on a societal scale. The fire in the brazier pops, sending a spark onto the tatami mat. You stamp it out instinctively. Quick reflexes. You smile, a grim, iron-toothed smile. The philosophers can argue about the nuances of Bushido in the safety of their tea houses. Nitobe Inazo can write his books about the soul of Japan 50 years from now. Tonight, your version of the code is simple. Keep the spark from burning the house down. And if the house must burn, make sure you are the one holding the match, not the enemy. You blow out the lantern, the darkness is complete. You have the skills, the body, the map, and the code. But outside, the world is shifting. The ships have arrived. The old ways of sword and spear are about to collide with something that doesn't care about your honor or your training. The smell of black powder is drifting on the wind, and it's coming from the west. The year is 1853. You are sitting on the veranda, polishing the shaft of your naginata with a cloth soaked in walnut oil. When a servant runs in, he is out of breath, pale, and forgetting to bow properly, which in your household is usually grounds for a stern lecture or a smack with a fan. But today, you let it slide because he's holding a kawarabon, a cheaply printed news sheet that looks like it was stamped in a panic. The ink is still wet. The headline, if you can call it, "That's Crimes of Monsters." For over 200 years, your world has been a sealed jar. This is the policy of Sakoku, or locked country. No foreigners in, no Japanese out. The only exception has been a tiny artificial island in Nagasaki, where a handful of Dutch traders are allowed to sell sugar and telescopes, provided they behave themselves. You grew up believing the world outside Japan was a chaotic void of barbarians who did understand the concept of bathing or chopsticks. But now, the news sheet says the barbarians are here, and they brought dragons. They call them Kurafuan, the Black Ships. 4 massive vessels have anchored in Edo Bay, right on the doorstep of the shogun's capital. They are painted black with tar, looking like floating coffins. But the terrifying part isn't the color, it's the movement. 2 of them have no sails. They are spewing thick black clouds of smoke into the pristine sky, moving against the wind, churning the water with massive paddle wheels that look like the legs of a thrashing centipede. To a population that has only ever seen wind-powered junk boats, this looks like witchcraft. It looks like the end of the world. You probably wouldn't survive the psychological shock of this moment. Imagine if you looked out your window right now and saw an alien mothership hovering over your local grocery store. That is the level of existential dread coursing through the castle. The rumors are flying faster than arrows. People say the foreigners are 10 feet tall, have red hair like demons, and breathe fire. Here is a mainstream historical fact. The man commanding these ships was Commodore Matthew Perry of the United States Navy. He wasn't there to make friends. He was there to force Japan to open its ports to American whaling ships and trade. He didn't ask nicely. He aimed his Paxon's guns' massive cannons capable of firing explosive shells directly at the coastal defenses. Japan had cannons, sure, but they were antique smoothbores that were about as effective against Perry's fleet as a pea shooter against a tank. The message was clear: open up, or we burn your house down. As a woman of the warrior class, you feel a specific kind of nausea. Your entire life, your training, your codites, all built on the premise of a fair fight. Or at least, a fight where skill matters. You train to deflect a sword strike, you train to grapple, you train to read the micro-movements of an opponent's eyes. But how do you grapple with a steamship? How do you apply a wrist lock to an exploding artillery shell? The arrival of the Black Ships renders your martial arts suddenly painfully quaint. It's like being a master calligrapher in a world that just invented the laser printer. The castle is in chaos. The men are arguing. Some want to fight, invoking the spirit of the kamikaze divine wind that stopped the Mongols centuries ago. Others, the realists, are doing the math and realizing that fighting means annihilation. You, from your vantage point in the inner chambers, see the fear behind their bluster. You see your husband checking his sword, but his hand is trembling just a fraction. He knows, the sword is obsolete. But the Americans didn't just bring guns, they brought gadgets. And this leads to one of the most surreal and quirky fringe tidbits of the era. To impress the Japanese dignitaries and show off Western technological superiority, Perry set up a demonstration on the beach. He built a circular track and set up a P-scale steam locomotive, a miniature train. It was big enough to ride, but just barely. So picture this. You have these high-ranking, stoic samurai men who take themselves incredibly seriously. Men who would commit ritual suicide if they suffered a public embarrassment. And they are sitting on top of a toy train, their robes fluttering in the wind, giggling and screaming as it chugs around the track at 20 miles per hour. It's a scene straight out of a fever dream. It was a diplomatic flex away of saying, look at our toys. If our toys can do this, Imagine what our weapons can do. The technological shock permeates the household. Suddenly, there is a scramble for Western knowledge. The Dutch traders in Nagasaki are bombarded with requests for books on ballistics, engineering, and medicine. Your brothers are no longer memorizing Confucian classics. They are trying to decipher diagrams of steam engines. The castle armory begins to look different. Alongside the racks of spears and katanas, crates of imported rifles begin to appear. They smell of grease and manufacturing, lacking the spiritual aura of the family blades. You pick one up. It's heavy, awkward, and ugly. It has no soul. A sword is forged with prayer. This thing was stamped out in a factory in Connecticut. But when you aim it, you realize the terrifying equality of it. A peasant with 1 week of training and a rifle can kill a samurai who has trained for 40 years. The hierarchy of violence is collapsing. Historians still argue whether the arrival of the black ships was the primary cause of the shogunate's fall, or if it merely kicked in the door of a rotting house. This is the external pressure versus internal rot debate. Many scholars point out that Japan was already suffering from famine, economic stagnation, and peasant uprisings. The shogunate was broke and losing control. Perry just provided the catalyst-â common enemy that exposed the government's inability to protect the nation. It's the straw that broke the camel's back theory, but the straw was a 2,000-ton warship. In the women's quarters, the conversation shifts. You are no longer discussing the harvest or the tea ceremony. You are discussing Joy Expel, the barbarians. It becomes a rallying cry, but there is a bitter irony to it. To expel the barbarians, you have to become like them. You have to adopt their weapons to drive them out. You have to sell your soul to save your home. The treaty is signed. The ports are opened. Foreigners begin to trickle into the treaty ports, like Yokohama. They bring cameras, telegraphs, and chocolate. They also bring cholera. The floating world is popping like a soap bubble. The daimyo, your lord, is called to the capital more frequently. He demands more taxes to pay for coastal defenses. The peasants are angry. The samurai are humiliated. You look at your kakan, the dagger in your sash. It feels small. It was designed to protect your honor in a close-quarters struggle. It was designed for a world of personal responsibility. But the world looming on the horizon is impersonal. It is a world of bombardment and volleys. The wind chimes on the veranda tinkle softly, a sound that used to bring you peace. Now, it sounds like a countdown. The black ships have sailed away, promising to return, but they left something behind. The knowledge that you are vulnerable. The walls of your castle, which once seemed impregnable, now look like stacks of kindling waiting for a spark. And the spark isn't coming from the Americans anymore. It's coming from within. The country is splitting into those who support the shogun and those who support the emperor. A civil war is brewing, and unlike the ritualized battles of the past, this one will be fought with modern hate and modern gunpowder. You slide the naginata back into its rack. You have a feeling you're going to need it soon, not for a duel, but for a slaughter. The rumors from the west have turned into a reality in the east, and the sun is setting on the era of the sword. But the sun hasn't set on you, not yet. You have a household to prepare, and if the world is going to end, you're going to make sure your family is the last one standing in the ruins. The year is now 1867. And if you thought the arrival of the black ships was chaotic, welcome to the main event. The political structure of Japan, which has held steady for over 2.5 centuries, isn't just cracking, it is exploding. You are standing in the center of a nation that is effectively having a nervous breakdown. For years, the debate was theoretical. Men in silk robes argued in tea houses about whether to open the country or keep it closed. But now, the debate has moved to the streets, and the arguments are being made with swords and pistols. The country has split into two violent camps. On one side, you have the shogunate forces, the status quo, the government in Edo, Tokyo, that your family has served for generations. On the other side, you have the imperialist, the Sacho Alliance, terrifying team-up of southern domains, who have decided that the shogun is a dinosaur and that power should return to the emperor in Kyoto. You, unfortunately, are likely on the side of the dinosaur. Most of the northern clans, the stalwart defenders of tradition, are fiercely loyal to the Tokugawa shogunate. This means you are backing the losing horse, but you don't know that yet. You just know that the atmosphere in the castle has shifted from cautious worry to existential panic. The messengers arrive daily now. They don't walk, they run, their horses are frothing. They bring news of assassinations in Kyoto. They tell stories of the Shinsengumi, the shogun's special police force. The wolves of Mibuhu are prowling the streets of the capital, cutting down dissenters in bloody night raids. It sounds romantic in a grim way, like a noir thriller, until you realize these are the people protecting your interests, and they are losing control. But while the politicians scream and the assassins stalk, the common people are doing something ... bizarre. Here is your quirky fringe tidbit for the section, and it is a doozy. It's called Iya Nai Ka. Imagine the world is ending. The government is collapsing, inflation is skyrocketing, and foreign battleships are in the harbor. What do? Apparently, you dance. Starting in late 1867, a mass hysteria sweeps across Japan. Thousands of commoners flood the streets. They wear crazy costumes, cross-dress, break into the houses of the wealthy to demand food and sake, and dance frantically while chanting Iya Nai Ka, which roughly translates to, why not? Or who cares? Or it's all good. It's a nihilistic carnival. Talismans fall from the sky, allegedly, and people take it as a sign that the gods have left the building, so the rules no longer apply. From your castle walls, you might hear the distant rhythmic chanting of a mob that has decided to party through the apocalypse. It's surreal. It's the 19th century equivalent of the "this is fine" dog meme, but with more sake and fewer chairs. It creates a terrifying backdrop to your preparations, a reminder that the social order you are sworn to defend has already evaporated for the people below you. Inside the castle, the mood is somber. The men are holding secret councils late into the night. You are not invited to these meetings, but you know exactly what is happening because you are the one bringing the tea and changing the candles. You hear the whispers. The domains of Satsuma and Choshuhu hated each other for centuries, have shaken hands. Here is a mainstream historical fact. The Sacho alliance was brokered by a masterless samurai named Sakamoto Ryoma. It was a diplomatic miracle. It united the military might of Satsuma with the extremist zeal of Choshu, creating a juggernaut that possessed modern British weapons and a burning desire to topple the shogun. This alliance changes the math. Your clan isn't just facing a rebellion, it's facing a modernized army that has spent the last decade buying rifles while your uncles were polishing their spears. The tension breaks when the news arrives. The shogun, Tokugawa Yoshinobu, has resigned. It's called the Teisei Hoken, the return of power to the emperor. In theory, this should be the end of it. The shogun steps down, the emperor steps up, and everyone goes home to have some sushi. But politics is never that simple. The imperialists don't just want the shogun to retire, they want him destroyed. They strip him of his lands and titles, they back him into a corner until he has no choice but to fight. The civil war, the Boshin War, has begun. You watch as the transformation of your household accelerates. The beautiful lacquerware boxes that held seasonal poems are emptied and filled with bandages. The decorative screens are moved to make room for strategy maps. The floating world has crashed into the rocks. Historians still argue about the nature of this conflict. Was it a restoration, Meiji Ishin, implying a glorious return to the natural order of imperial rule? Or was it a revolution, or even a coup d'etat by lower-ranking samurai from the south who just wanted to seize power for themselves? Depending on who you ask, your family are either loyalists defending the lawful government or traitors to the emperor. History is written by the victors, so spoiler alert, you are going to end up labeled as the rebels. But in this moment, you believe you are the patriots. You are fighting for the legacy of the samurai, for the stability that held the nation together for centuries. You start to notice the fear in the eyes of the servants. Some of them disappear in the night, packing their meager belongings and fleeing to the countryside. You can't blame them. Loyalty is easy when the rice is plentiful. It's much harder when the cannons are rolling toward the gate. The Ianai dancers might be shouting, "Who cares?" But you care a lot. Your husband or father returns from the capital. He looks 10 years older. He has swapped his formal court robes for practical riding gear. He tells you that the shogun's army was defeated at the Battle of Toba-Fushimi. It wasn't even close. The imperial forces unfurled the Nishikino Mahara, the imperial brocade banners. When the shogun's troops saw the emperor's flag, their morale disintegrated. You can fight an army, but you can't fight God. And in Japan, the emperor is a living god. This is the psychological checkmate. Your family is now technically fighting against the emperor, the very figurehead the samurai class was theoretically supposed to revere. The cognitive dissonance is blinding. You are being told to fire upon the symbols of your own culture. The war is moving north. It is coming for you. The Aizu domain, the stronghold of the resistance, is the next target. Your castle isn't just a home anymore. It's a target on a map in an imperial general's tent. You stand in the armory, looking at the rows of armor. The oiroi, the great boxy armor of the ancient past, sits dusty in the corner. Next to it is the tosegasoku, the modern armor, lighter and more form-fitting. You run your fingers over the lacquered plates. You check the silk cords that lace them together. Are they frayed? Will they hold? You realize that the political maneuvering is over. The time for letters and envoys has passed. The diplomats have failed, as they usually do, leaving the cleanup to the soldiers. And since the soldiers are outnumbered and outgunned, the cleanup is going to fall to you. You walk back to your quarters and open a small chest. Inside is a white headband, a hachimaki. It is a symbol of determination, of exertion. You tie it around your forehead, testing the fit. You look in the mirror, the black teeth, the shaved eyebrows, the white headband. You look like a ghost. The boiling point has been reached. The pot has boiled over, and the scalding water is flooding the floor. The shogunate has crumbled, leaving only the die-hard loyalists to hold the line. You are one of them. The dawn training you hated so much, the cold water, the heavy naginata. All makes sense now. It wasn't tradition, it was a prophecy. You blow out the candle. Tomorrow, the household stops being a family and starts being a battalion. You have a lot of work to do and very little time to do it. The men are preparing the cannons, but you have a harder job. You have to prepare the women. You have to turn the gentle kimono-clad ladies of the court into the hairpin squad. The decision has been made. The gates are barred. The bridge is drawn. The castle is no longer a residence. It is a lifeboat in a rising sea of violence. And just like on a lifeboat, the first order of business is figuring out what to throw overboard and what to hoard like a dragon sitting on a pile of gold. This is where your domestic training stops being housekeeping and starts being tactical logistics. You stand in the Great Hall, which is usually reserved for receiving dignitaries and drinking tea out of cups that cost more than a peasant's annual income. Today, it looks like a warehouse explosion. You are the quartermaster general now. The men might be the ones firing the guns, but you are the one making sure they don't starve or bleed out while doing it. First, you deal with the food. You command the servants, those who haven't fled, to raid the deep storage. You are pulling out sacks of hoshi, or dried rice. This isn't the fluffy, steaming white rice you're used to. This is rice that has been cooked and then dried in the sun until it has the consistency of gravel. It can last for 20 years if kept dry. To eat it, you either rehydrate it with water if you have time, or you just gnaw on it like a rat if you are being shot at. It's a jaw workout and a meal in one. Then come the umeboshi pickled plums. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit for your survival kit. Umeboshi were considered the superfood of the samurai. They are so salty and sour that they induce a grimace just by looking at them, but they are miracle workers. They preserve food, they stimulate saliva, combating thirst when water is scarce, and in a pinch, the pulp can be applied to wounds as a primitive antiseptic. You are literally packing barrels of salty fruit grenades. You aren't stocking a pantry, you are stocking a pharmacy. Next, you turn your attention to the architecture. You look at the tatami mats on the floor. For years, you've been scolded for stepping on the borders or spilling tea on them. Now, you order them to be ripped up. Here is a mainstream historical fact. In a siege, tatami mats were stripped from the floors, soaked in water, and propped up against the wooden walls or arrow slits. Why? Because a wet, thick block of compressed straw is surprisingly bullet-resistant. It can stop an arrow, it can slow down a musket ball, and most importantly, it doesn't catch fire easily. You are essentially armor plating the inside of your house with the flooring. It ruins the feng shui, but it stops the shrapnel. The atmosphere is frantic but controlled. There is a specific rhythm to it. Rip, splash, stack, rip, splash, stack. The beautiful aesthetic of the castle is being dismantled piece by piece, the silk screens depicting serene mountain landscapes. They are being torn down to use as kindling or to bandage wounds. The decorative heavy stones in the garden, they are being hauled up to the ramparts to be dropped on people's heads. Speaking of bandages, this is the part that hurts your heart a little. You go to your personal chests. You pull out the kimonos, not the everyday cotton ones, but the silk ones, the ones with the gold thread. the ones you wore for the New Year's celebration. You take a pair of scissors or your kakon and you start ripping. The sound of tearing silk is high-pitched and screaming. It feels like a sacrilege. These garments represent your status, your history, your femininity. But a silk bandage has a grim advantage. When a bullet or arrow enters the body, it drags the fabric with it. Silk doesn't shatter into lint like cotton does. It stays intact, making it easier to fish out of the wound later. You are trading beauty for survivability. Historians still argue about the command structure inside the castle during these final sieges. Was the domestic division completely autonomous, or were women taking direct orders from the military commanders? The evidence suggests a high degree of autonomy. The men were too busy watching the horizon to worry about how many bandages were in the East Wing. The women ran the internal economy of the siege. You weren't just helping, you were the operational spine of the defense. You moved to the kitchen. It's a hellscape of steam and noise. You are ordering the production of musubi rice balls, thousands of them. They need to be salted heavily to preserve them. You are also preparing large cauldrons of boiling water and oil. This isn't for cooking. This is for the welcome committee we discussed earlier. You have to coordinate a bucket brigade to get that scalding liquid from the kitchen to the walls. Without scalding your own people, it's a logistical nightmare. Amidst the chaos, you find a moment of stillness in the armory. You are handing out weapons to the other women. But not everyone gets a naginata. There aren't enough to go around. So, you improvise. You hand out sturdy kitchen knives. You hand out heavy wooden mallets used for pounding rice cakes. You hand out fire hooks. Anything that can puncture, bludgeon, or slash is now a weapon of war. You look at the grandmother of the household. She is too old to fight, too frail to run. But she is sitting in the corner, calmly sharpening bamboo stakes. She is whittling the ends to needle points and hardening them over a fire. These are tokayari. In the hands of a master, they are dangerous. In the hands of a desperate civilian, they are a last-ditch effort to take someone with you. She catches your eye and smiles, a toothless, blackened void. She isn't afraid, she's just busy. The hardest part is the clean sweep. You have to go through the rooms and remove anything that could aid the enemy if they breach the walls. Maps, letters, family genealogies, mating with intel value must be burned. You are erasing your family's history to protect its future. You watch the paper curl and blacken in the hearth. It feels like you are burning your own memories. As night falls, the castle is unrecognizable. The floors are bare wood, the windows are barricaded with wet straw. The smell of incense has been replaced by the smell of pickling, brine, wet straw, and iron. You have successfully turned a palace into a bunker. You wipe your hands on your apron, which is already stained with soot. You are exhausted, but the adrenaline is keeping you upright. You have secured the water supply, rationed the food, and armed the non-combatants. The home is gone. What remains is a fortress. But there is one final preparation to make, and it involves the people standing around you. The servants, the daughters, the wives, they are looking to you. They are terrified. They need more than just rice balls and bamboo spears. They need a leader. The men have their captains, but the women have, well, they have you. And you need to organize them into something more than just a frightened mob. You need to forge them into a unit. It's time to call the hairpin squad to order. The heavy wooden gates of the inner citadel boom shut, sealing the men outside and the women inside. The sound echoes through the courtyard like a thunderclap, final and absolute. For a moment, there is silence, the kind of heavy, suffocating silence that usually precedes a tornado siren. You look around the room, the men are gone. Your father, your husband, your brothers, they are all on the outer ramparts, manning the cannons and the arrow slits. They are the first line of defense. You look at who is left. It's a sea of anxious faces, illuminated by the flickering light of the lanterns you haven't smashed yet. There are the other samurai wives, their faces pale but composed, their hands gripping their sleeves. There are the daughters, eyes wide, clutching dolls or small amulets. There are the servants, the maids, and the kitchen staff, who look like they might faint at any moment. And then there are the grandmothers, who look bored. Because once you've survived 70 years of feudal politics and smallpox outbreaks, a civil war is just another Tuesday. This is your army. It's not exactly the 300 Spartans. It looks more like a very tense book club, but it's all you have. You clap your hands, sharp, loud, authoritative. The sound snaps the room to attention. You can't let them dwell on the fear. Panic is a contagion, And in a closed space like a castle keep, it spreads faster than the flu in a kindergarten classroom. You need to give them a job. You need to turn this group of civilians into a paramilitary unit, and you have about 5 minutes to do it before the first shell hits the wall. You step up onto a raised platform, the tokonoma alcove, which is technically reserved for art, but today it's your soapbox. You address them. You don't use the flowery language of the court. You use the language of the kitchen and the dojo. You tell them that the men are fighting for the clan, but we are fighting for the home. If the walls are breached, the men die fighting. If the keep is breached, well, you don't need to finish that sentence. Everyone knows the implications. The silence in the room shifts from fear to a cold, hard resolve. You start organizing. This is where the hairpin squad gets its name. You point to the women's hair. For centuries, Japanese women's hairstyles were elaborate architectural marvels, held together by kanza shilong, decorative hairpins made of brass, silver, or tortoiseshell. Some of these pins are over a foot long. Take them out, you order. There is a hesitation. Taking down the hair is a sign of undress, of vulnerability. But you reach up and pull out your own metal kanzashi. It's a solid rod of brass with a sharpened tip. You hold it up in the dim light. It doesn't look like jewelry anymore. It looks like a stiletto. If they get past the naginatas, you say, hefting the pin, this goes in the neck or the eye. It's a grim reality check, but it works. A ripple of movement goes through the crowd as women reach up and dismantle their updos. The elaborate coiffures tumble down. They hold the pins like daggers. You've just armed 50 women with concealed weapons in under 30 seconds. It's the most terrifying makeover montage in history. Here is a mainstream historical fact. In the Aizu domain, during the Boshin War, women of the samurai class formally organized themselves into ad hoc combat units. The most famous of these was the Joshitai Women's Army, led by Nakano Takeko. These weren't just camp followers. They were an organized fighting force that operated independently of the male command structure. While you aren't quite at that legendary level yet, you are building the foundation for it, right here in the Great Hall. You start assigning roles based on ability, not status. This is a radical departure from normal life. Usually, the hierarchy is rigid. The wife of the high-ranking retainer sits at the top, and the kitchen maid sits at the bottom. But war is a meritocracy. You look at the sturdy kitchen maid who spends her days lifting heavy bags of rice. She has arms like bridge cables. You say, pointing to her. You're on barricade duty. Grab the heaviest furniture you can find and pile it against the lower doors. You look at the delicate highborn daughter, who has never lifted anything heavier than a tea whisk, but has impeccable handwriting and a mind for details. Your logistics: count the arrows, count the rice balls. If we run out of anything, I want to know before it happens. You look at the older women, the ones with the blackened teeth and the calm eyes. You are the supervisors. Keep everyone calm. If somebody starts to panic, slap them, gently if possible, hard if necessary. Then, you turn to the core group, the women like you, who were born into the blade, the ones who know the weight of a naginata. There are maybe 10 or 12 of you. You are the elite guard. You will patrol the inner corridors. You will be the ones to engage if the enemy breaks through. You form a perimeter, checking each other's equipment. There is a scholarly debate here that is worth noting. Historians often argue about whether the men of the clan actually approved of these female combat units, or if they just looked the other way because they were desperate. Some records suggest that male commanders were uncomfortable with women fighting, seeing it as a sign of their own failure to protect them. Others suggest they were grateful for the backup. The truth is likely a don't ask, don't tell situation. The men are busy dying on the walls. They aren't going to come inside and micromanage your defensive strategy. You have carte blanche because the chain of command has effectively dissolved into survival of the fittest. You run a quick drill, it's chaotic. You have a merchant's daughter holding a bamboo spear like it's a broom. You have to correct her grip. Pointy end, toward the bad guys, you mutter, channeling your inner drill sergeant. And don't close your eyes when you thrust. If you can't see them, you can't kill them. It's a steep learning curve. You are trying to undo a lifetime of conditioning that says women should be gentle and passive. You are teaching them to be dangerous. You instruct them on the ambush protocols. You can't win a fair fight against soldiers with rifles, so you teach them to fight dirty. You show them how to hide behind the sliding fusima doors and strike when the enemy walks past. You show them how to throw the blinding powder ash and chili pepper you prepared earlier. You are turning the domestic space into a kill box, and every woman in the room is a trap. The atmosphere in the room changes. The fear is still there, but it has crystallized into adrenaline. They aren't victims waiting for the slaughter anymore. They are active participants in their own fate. There is a strange, frantic energy. A few nervous jokes are cracked. Someone asks if using a heavy iron tea kettle to bludgeon an imperial soldier counts as a proper tea ceremony. You laugh, a sharp barking sound. Only if you bow afterwards, you reply. But beneath the dark humor, there is a heavy realization. You look at your sisters, your friends. You know that not all of you are going to survive the next few days. You are looking at ghosts. But you push that thought down deep into the pit of your stomach where the cold water training lives. You realize that while you have the weapons and the will, you still look wrong. You are still wearing the trailing sleeves of the court. You are still wearing the restrictive kimonos designed for shuffling, not sprinting. The hair is down, yes, but the transformation isn't complete. To fight like a warrior, you have to shed the last vestiges of the lady. You signal to the group, "We can't fight in these," you say, gesturing to the silk robes that pool on the floor, "and we can't die in them either." It's time for the final step of the transformation. It's the step that signifies there is no going back. It's time to cut the ties to your past life, quite literally. You reach for the shears. The hairpin squad is formed, but now they need to look the part. You are standing in the center of the room, the heavy iron shears in your hand. They are normally used for pruning the bonsai trees or cutting thick cloth, cold and utilitarian. Around you, the other women watch, their breath hitched in their chests. You reach up and undo the remaining ties, letting your hair fall loose. It cascades down your back, a heavy curtain of black silk that reaches past your waist. It has taken a lifetime to grow this hair. It has been washed with rice water, combed with boxwood combs, dipped in camellia oil, and styled into shapes that defy gravity. In your culture, this hair is not just a body part. It is your identity. It is the visible sign of your femininity, your status, your soul, and you are about to chop it all off. This isn't a fashion statement. It isn't a rebellious breakup haircut. This is a ritual of severance. In the Buddhist tradition, cutting one's hair often signifies renouncing the world to become a nun. But you aren't becoming a nun, or perhaps you are, in a way. You are renouncing the world of the living to enter the world of the dead. You are engaging in jigai, the preparation for death. By cutting your hair, you are telling the universe that the woman who arranged flowers and played the koto is gone. Only the warrior remains. You take a breath, smelling the stale air of the closed keep. You grasp the thick bundle of hair at the nape of your neck. The metal shears are dull, so you have to saw at it. The sound is a sickening, dry crunch. Snip, snip. The resistance of the hair surprises you. It's strong like a rope. Finally, the last strands give way, and the weight vanishes. The physical sensation is shocking. Your head feels suddenly light, almost floaty. The air touches the back of your neck, a spot that hasn't felt a direct breeze in 10 years. It makes you shiver. You look down at the mass of black hair lying on the tatami mat like a dead animal. It looks alien. You feel a pang of grief, sharp and hot, but you swallow it. There is no room for vanity in a siege. One by one, the other women follow your lead. The room fills with the sound of shearing. Daughters cut their mother's hair. Sisters cut each other's. There is no weeping, only a grim, efficient silence. The floor becomes carpeted in black. Here is a mainstream historical fact. This practice was practical as much as it was symbolic. Long hair in a melee is a death sentence. An opponent can grab a ponytail or a bun and use it to snap your neck or drag you to the ground. In close quarters, if your hair is loose, it can blind you. By cropping it short off into shoulder length or a rough bob, you are removing a handle that an enemy could use to kill you. You are streamlining your silhouette for violence. But there is a darker reason for this haircut, and it brings us to the fringe, quirky tidbit of the section. You aren't just leaving the hair on the floor. You instruct the women to gather small locks of their cut hair, along with fingernail clippings, and wrap them in small pieces of white paper. They write their names on these packets. Why? Because in the era of modern artillery, bodies don't always come back in one piece. If a shell hits the keep, there might not be enough of you left to bury. These little packets of hair and nails are shadow burials. They are keepsakes for the survivors if there are any to place in the family altar. You are effectively preparing your own funeral urns while you are still alive. It's a level of pragmatic morbidity that is hard for the modern mind to process. Imagine packing A in case I get vaporized kit before you go to work. It puts the concept of life insurance to shame. As the hair comes off, you begin to alter your clothing. The trailing kimono is a tripping hazard. You hike the hem up, tucking it high into your sash until it sits at knee length, exposing your legs. This is scandalous in peacetime. A highborn lady showing her ankles, unthinkable. But right now, you need mobility. You need to be able to sprint, kick, and climb. If you are lucky, you have hakame, the wide, pleated trousers worn by men and martial artists. You step into them, tying the cords tight. The feeling of fabric between your legs instead of a skirt is liberating. It changes how you stand. You can widen your stance. You can squat. You feel grounded. You take a long strip of white cotton cloth and wrap it around your chest, binding your breasts tight. This isn't for gender dysmorphia. It's for armor fitting and to prevent movement. It's the feudal version of a high-impact sports bra, but made of non-stretch cotton that restricts your breathing if you tie it too tight. You learn the balance, tight enough to hold, loose enough to sprint. Then comes the tasuki. This is a cord, usually white, used to tie back the long flowing sleeves of the kimono. You loop it over one shoulder, across the back, under the other arm, and tie it off. It creates a distinctive X across your back. It instantly transforms the silhouette from court lady to combat ready. It frees your arms for the naginata swing. The sensation of the tasuki biting into your shoulders is a physical trigger. It signals that work is about to begin. Historians still argue about the intent behind these modifications. Specifically, were women trying to pass as men? Some scholars suggest that by cutting their hair and wearing men's trousers, onna-bugeisha were attempting to disguise their gender to avoid the specific sexual violence that targeted female captives. If you look like a male soldier from a distance, maybe you just get shot rather than captured. Others argue that the modifications were purely functional and that the women wore distinctive sashes or headbands to identify themselves as women warriors, taking pride in their female identity even in battle. You look in the bronze mirror again, the person staring back at you is a stranger. The blackened teeth and shaved eyebrows are still there, but now the hair is jagged and short. The neck is exposed, the clothes are rough and ready. You look like a monk who picked up a spear. You look like an Amagasona warrior nun. The room has changed, too. The piles of hair on the floor absorb the sound, making the space feel dead and muffled. The women stand taller now. The vulnerability of the damsel is gone. They look harder, angular. The shedding of the hair has stripped away the softness. You are all angles and edges now. You walk over to the youngest of the group, a girl of maybe 15. She is trembling, holding her shorn hair in her hands like a dead bird. You put a hand on her shoulder. You don't tell her it will be okay, because that would be a lie. You tell her, "You are lighter now. You are faster." She nods, wiping a tear that streaks through the white powder on her face. She ties her tasuki with shaking hands, but she ties it tight. The transformation of the body is complete. You have stripped away the heavy layers of tradition that kept you slow and soft. You have prepared your own funeral tokens. You have bound your body for war, but you are still soft flesh. Against the rifles waiting outside, silk and cotton are nothing. You need a shell. You need the carapace of the beetle. You turn toward the heavy wooden chests that have been brought down from the armory. They smell of camphor and old leather. Inside them lies the Gusokatha armor. It wasn't made for you. It was made for your grandfather, or perhaps a slight-framed uncle. It will be heavy. It will pinch. It will smell like sweat from 3 generations ago. But it is the only thing standing between your vital organs and a jagged piece of shrapnel. You signal to the women to open the chests. The haircut was the emotional point of no return. Putting on the armor is the physical one. Once the plates are laced on, there is no running away. You are locked in. Gear up, you say, your voice flat and hard. The shears are dropped on the floor, landing on the piles of hair. You won't be needing them anymore. From now on, the only things you will be cutting are enemies. You are now standing in the middle of the room in your undergarments, which, for the record, is not a sexy look in feudal Japan. It's a utilitarian one. You're wearing the shitage, a short white undershirt, and a loincloth, and you are shivering. But the shivering is about to stop, mostly because you are about to be encased in about 40 pounds of insulation that smells like a museum basement. Welcome to the process of donning the gustoku. If you thought putting on a modern sports bra was a wrestling match, you are in for a treat. Putting on samurai armor is less like getting dressed and more like assembling a piece of IKEA furniture. Except you are the furniture, and if you miss a screw, you die. The armor chests are open. Inside, the suits are folded into neat, terrifying little squares. You aren't reaching for the ancient, boxy armor of the 12th century. That stuff was basically a wooden shed you wore on your shoulders. You are reaching for the Tossaka Castle, the modern armor of the Edo period. It's designed for mobility, for gunpowder warfare, and for people who need to actually bend their waists. But mobile is a relative term. It's still layers of iron and leather lacquered together and laced with silk. You start from the bottom up. This is rule number 1. If you put the chest piece on first, you won't be able to bend over to tie your shoes, and you will look ridiculous asking a servant to do it for you while you stand there like a stuck turtle. First come the suni at the shin guards. They are plates of iron connected by chainmail and sewn onto heavy cloth. You wrap them around your calves and tie the cords tight. Too loose, and they'll slide around while you're running, tripping you up. Too tight, and you cut off circulation to your feet. You have to find the Goldilocks zone of arterial flow. Next are the hadot, the thigh guards. This is essentially an armored apron. It ties around your waist and hangs down to your knees, covered in small, lacquered tiles called karuta. It protects your femoral arteries, which is great, but it also feels like wearing a skirt made of roofing shingles. It clatters when you walk. Click-clack, click-clack. You are suddenly very aware of your own volume. Stealth is no longer an option. You are a percussion instrument. Here is a mainstream historical fact. Samurai armor was surprisingly distinct from European knight armor in its philosophy of weight distribution. A European knight carried the weight on his shoulders. A samurai carried it on his hips. The cuirass was designed to taper at the waist, transferring the load to the hips so the shoulders remained free for archery or swordplay. This means that if the armor fits correctly, you should feel relatively light. If it fits poorly, which yours does, because it wasn't made for you, it feels like a toddler is sitting on your neck. And that brings us to the scholarly debate of the hour. Did female samurai have their own gender-specific armor? If you visit museums today, you might see armor with a pinched waist, or even breast-shaped cuirasses labeled as female armor. But most historians call bluff. They argue that these were likely ceremonial pieces made much later, or simply armor made for slender men or boys. The consensus is that in a siege, Onna-bugeisha wore whatever was in the armory. You are likely wearing the armor of a younger brother or a small uncle. This means there is no boob armor contouring. You just smash everything flat. You bind your chest, exhale, and strap the iron plate down. It's comfortable in the same way a mammogram is comfortable. You pull on the coat the armored sleeves. These are sleeves of silk brocade covered in chainmail, kusari, and iron plates. They tie across your chest. You have to wiggle your arms into them. The chainmail is heavy, dragging your arms down. But the critical design feature here is the armpit. The coat does not cover the armpit. This is the ventilation shaft of the suit, allowing you to swing a sword without resistance. It is also the #1 target for an enemy spearman. You make a mental note. Don't raise your arms like you re-celebrating a touchdown. Keep your elbows in, protect the pits. Now, for the main event, the do. This is the clamshell chest armor. You step into it, or have it lowered over your head. It clamps around your torso. The smell hits you instantly: lacquer, Urushield leather, and the faint ghostly scent of the sweat of whoever wore this last. The Urushi lacquer is actually made from the sap of a tree related to poison ivy. When cured, it's hard as plastic, waterproof, and non-toxic. But the smell is distinct. It smells like chemical warfare. You tie the cords at the side, you feel the enclosure. Your breathing changes. You can't take deep belly breaths anymore. You have to breathe into your upper chest. Panic flares for a second. Claustrophobia is a real risk here. You are locked in a dark box, but you force yourself to breathe rhythmically. In, out, in, out. You are not trapped, you are templated. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit about the knotting process. The knot used to secure the armor on the back, often joining the shoulder straps to the backplate, is called the agmaki. It's a decorative, dragonfly-shaped knot. But it wasn't just for fashion. In Japanese folklore, knots were powerful talismans. The agmaki was believed to confuse evil spirits. A demon trying to attack you from behind would get entranced or tangled in the complexity of the knot, and fail to strike. It's a literal devil trap worn on your back. Since you can't tie this knot yourself, unless you have disjointed shoulders, you have to rely on a sister-in-arms to tie it for you. It's a moment of intimacy and trust. You feel her hands on your back, pulling the cords tight, sealing you in. She is literally watching your back before the fight even starts. You skip the kabuto helmet. Most onna-bugeisha depictions show them wearing the hachimaki headband or a simple forehead protector haitiet. A full helmet is heavy, limits your peripheral vision, and muffles your hearing. In the chaos of a castle defense, you need to hear commands and spot intruders in the rafters. Plus, you just cut your hair. A helmet would slide around on your head like a bucket. You tie the white headband tighter. It digs into your forehead, a constant reminder of your focus. You tuck your Kaken dagger into the waistband of the armor. It's harder to reach now, buried under layers of silk and iron, but it's there. You pick up your naginata. The weight is total now. You are carrying maybe 30 or 40 pounds of gear. Gravity feels stronger. When you move, the armor resists you. You have to move with intention. You can't just walk, you have to march. The armor dictates your posture. It forces your spine straight, your chin up. You physically cannot slouch. It turns you into a statue of a warrior before you even act like one. You look at the other women, the transformation is jarring. The gentle faces, unutha, ones that smiled over tea, the ones that gossiped about suitors are gone. They are encased in iron shells. They look like beetles. They look identical. The individuality of the kimono is replaced by the uniformity of the gusoku. You are a unit now, a machine made of many parts. The air in the keep is stifling. It's getting hot inside the suit. You are already sweating, and the sweat has nowhere to go. It trickles down your back, itching, but you can't scratch it. You will be itchy until you die or until you win. That is your new reality. There is a moment of silence as the last knot is tied. The rustling of silk and the clacking of tiles stops. You stand there, a room full of iron women, breathing in unison. The domestic sphere has been completely erased. There is no softness left in the world. There is only hard lacquer and cold steel. You grip the shaft of your naginata. The wood feels grounding. You are ready, or as ready as you will ever be. You have done the drills. You have cut the hair. You have donned the shell. And then it happens. The silence is shattered not by a shout, but by a sound that vibrates through the soles of your feet before you even hear it. It's a dull, rhythmic thump. Then another thump. It sounds like a giant heart beating against the earth. It's the artillery. The Imperial Army has arrived, and they aren't knocking on the door. They are bringing the door down. The siege has begun, and the time for preparation is over. The time for the hairpin squad to bleed has arrived. The sound of a modern artillery shell hitting a medieval castle isn't a bang. Movies have lied to you. A bang implies a singular event, a firecracker going off. This is something else entirely. It is a geological event. It is the sound of the earth coughing up its lungs. You are standing in the hallway of the keep, your naginata gripped so tight your knuckles are white under the chainmail when the first shell makes contact with the outer wall. The impact vibrates through the soles of your feet, travels up your shins, bypasses your knees, and rattles your teeth in your skull. Dust centuries of accumulated dust from the rafters rains down instantly, coating your freshly lacquered armor in a fine gray powder. The air pressure in the room changes, a sudden thump against your eardrums that feels like being slapped by an invisible hand. Welcome to the bombardment. The siege of Aizu has officially transitioned from a strategic standoff to a demolition project. You stumble toward the arrow slits de Samat, see what is happening, but you don't need to see it to understand the physics of it. Your castle was built to withstand arrows, stones, and maybe the occasional heavy log used as a battering ram. It was designed for an era of horizontal warfare, but the enemy outside the imperial forces of the Sacho Alliance isn't playing by those rules. They have brought the Armstrong gun. Here is a mainstream historical fact that changes everything. The Armstrong gun was a British DeSmit rifled breechloader that fired explosive shells. Unlike the old-school cannonballs that just punched a hole in things like a giant bowling ball, Armstrong shells were filled with gunpowder and a fuse. They didn't just hit the wall. They embedded themselves into the wood or stone and then detonated. They turned the castle's own structure into shrapnel. The Imperial Army hauled over 100 of these monsters to the hills surrounding your home. They are literally taking the castle apart, brick by brick, from 2 miles away. You peer through the narrow wooden slat of the window. The view is terrifying. The hillsides, usually lush and green, are dotted with puffs of white smoke. A few seconds after you see the puff, you hear the crack thump of the report, followed by the whistling scream of the incoming shell. It's a sensory overload. The smell of sulfur-rotten eggs and hellfire begins to drift into the keep, overpowering the smell of the pickle barrels you packed earlier. But it's what you see down in the valley that really twists your stomach. The enemy army isn't a disciplined uniform block like the samurai armies of old. They are a motley, terrifying carnival. And this brings us to the quirky, fringe tidbit of the section. You might expect the imperial officers to look like modern Western soldiers. But thanks to a bizarre fashion trend among the restorationist forces, the officers from the Tosa domain are wearing Shiguma red bear wigs. Yes, giant, flowing wigs made from the dyed hair of yaks, or actual bears, depending on the budget. That looked like they belong in a glam rock band, or a production of The Lion King. The Satsuma officers wear black bear wigs, koguma, and the Choshu officers wear white ones, haguma. Imagine looking down from your burning castle and seeing a battalion of men in mismatching Western uniforms, topped with giant furry, color-coded afros, leading the charge. It looks ridiculous to the modern eye, but in 1868, it was a symbol of wild, untamed martial prowess. It was psychological warfare mixed with high fashion. They look like demons from a kabuki play come to life, and they are dragging Gatling guns through the mud. Inside the keep, the initial shock is wearing off, replaced by a frantic scramble for survival energy. The hairpin squad is moving. You scream orders over the roar of the explosions. Get the water buckets, wet the mats. You see a shell clip the corner of the Yagura watchtower adjacent to the keep. The wood splinters like a toothpick. A massive chunk of the roof slides off and crashes into the courtyard below, crushing a storehouse. The ground shakes again. If you were a civilian, you would be cowering in the basement. But you are in armor. You have a job. You grab a younger woman who is frozen in panic, her eyes wide as saucers. You don't comfort her. You shove a bucket of wet sand into her hands. Put out the fires. You yell, "If the wood burns, we all cook in these metal suits." It's a grim point. Wearing 40 pounds of metal in a burning building is essentially turning yourself into a human sous-vide packet. You have to keep the temperature down. Historians still argue about the extent of foreign involvement in this specific defense. We know the French military advisors, led by Jules Brunet, were heavily involved with the shogunate forces, the model for the last samurai. But there is a debate over whether French artillery experts were actually inside castles like Aizu during the final sieges, directing the counterfire, or if they had already retreated to Hokkaido to form the short-lived Iso Republic. Were you fighting alongside Pierre from Paris, or were you on your own? The consensus is that by the time the castle was fully surrounded, most foreign advisors had bailed or been cut off. You are likely alone. No Tom Cruise, no French cavalry, just you, the beer-wigged army outside, and a lot of exploding ordnance. The noise is relentless. It's a physical assault. You can't think, you can't hear orders, you have to rely on hand signals and that telepathic bond you formed during the morning drills. Point, move, douse. You run to the north side of the keep. The shelling here is worse because the walls are thinner. You see a group of male retainers firing back with matchlock rifles. It's pathetic to watch. Pop, pop, pop. Against the booming crump of the Armstrong guns, their return fire sounds like popcorn popping. They are trying to snipe artillery crews that are miles out of range. It's an act of defiance, not strategy. Suddenly, a shell smashes through the wall just 10 feet from you. The explosion throws you backward. You hit the floor hard, the armor taking the brunt of the impact but knocking the wind out of you. For a second, your vision goes white. A high-pitched ringing drowns out everything. You taste copper blood. No, you bit your tongue. You scramble to your knees, coughing in the cloud of plaster dust. You look at the spot where the wall used to be. There is a hole the size of a wagon wheel. Through it, you can see the sky. And you can see something else. The enemy infantry is moving. The bombardment was just the opening act to soften you up. Now the ants are coming to the picnic. You crawl to the edge of the hole, careful not to silhouette yourself, and look down. They are crossing the moat. They are throwing bundle bridges, bundles of bamboo and wood into the water to create crossings. They are climbing the stone walls like spiders. This is the moment the war changes for you. Until now, it was long distance. It was impersonal. But now, you can see their faces. You can see the sweat on their foreheads. You can see the bayonets fixed to their rifles. You scramble back to your feet, ignoring the bruising on your ribs. You grab your naginata from where it slid across the floor. You turn to the women behind you. They are covered in white dust, looking like statues that have come to life. They are looking at the hole in the wall. They know what comes next. They're climbing. You shout, your voice raspy from the dust. To the lower levels, block the stairs. You aren't just a defender anymore. You are a goalie, and the other team has just rushed the field. The artillery has stopped, which is actually more terrifying than the noise because it means they don't want to hit their own men. The safe distance of the bombardment is gone. The fight is about to get intimate. You rush down the steep, ladder-like stairs, your armor clanking, your heart hammering against the breastplate. You are descending into the belly of the keep, toward the breached gates and the crumbling walls. You are about to find out if all those mornings spent swinging a stick at a straw dummy were worth it. You are about to find out if a woman with a glaive can stop a modern army. You reach the ground floor landing. The heavy wooden doors are buckling. You can hear the axes on the other side. Thwack, thwack. They are chopping through. Splinters fly inward. You take a stance, feet wide, knees bent. Naginata held low. Tip pointed at the door. You glance at the woman next to you. It's the merchant's daughter with the bamboo spear. She is shaking so hard her spear tip is vibrating. Breath. You hiss at her. Deep breath. Aim for the belly. She nods, swallowing hard. The wood of the door splinters with a final, agonizing crack. A boot kicks it open. Sunlight floods into the dark hallway, blinding you for a second. And then the first shadow steps through the breach. The wooden door splinters, and the first Imperial soldier steps through the breach. He looks terrifying, a mix of modern infantry gear and traditional armor, bayonet fixed, eyes scanning for a threat. He expects a wall of men screaming and charging. He expects a glorious hidden collision of ideologies. Instead, he finds ... nothing. You and your squad have vanished. You didn't stand your ground like a statue. You evaporated like smoke. This isn't cowardice. It's the oldest trick in the book. You are applying the lesson of the bamboo bend so you don't break, and then snap back when they aren't looking. You have retreated into the labyrinth of the castle's interior, turning the building itself into your primary weapon. The soldiers flood into the hallway, shouting commands, their boots heavy on the polished wood. They are confident. They have the numbers. They have the guns. But they have made a critical error. They have entered a house designed by paranoids, defended by the people who memorized the blueprints. You are crouching in the crawlspace above the hallway rafters, peering through a decorative transom. You can smell them washed bodies, gun oil, and the acrid scent of black powder. You watch as they navigate the corridor. Here is a mainstream historical fact. Japanese castles were intentionally designed as mazes. This defensive philosophy is called nawabari, or rope-stretching layout planning. Corridors rarely ran straight for more than a few yards. They zigzagged, they had sudden dead ends. They had dog-leg turns that forced a right-handed swordsman to expose his weak side to attack just a corner. The soldiers below you are discovering this the hard way. They turn a corner, expecting a room, and find a solid wall. They turn back and find two corridors that look identical. They are rats in a psych experiment, and you are the scientist with the shock button. You signal to the women waiting in the shadows of the adjacent room. They are armed with the metsubushi we prepared earlier, the eye-crushing powder. It's a nasty blend of ash, ground pepper, fine sand, and sometimes even ground glass. It's basically a pocket sand grenade. As the soldiers bunch up at a confusing intersection, you give the signal. A sliding panel in the wall, one they thought was just decoration, slams open. Your squad doesn't attack with spears. They throw ceramic pots filled with the powder against the opposite wall. The pots shatter. A cloud of stinging, blinding dust fills the narrow corridor instantly. The soldiers scream. They claw at their eyes. They sneeze violently. Their rifles, so deadly at a distance, are useless now. They can't see to aim, and in the panic, they start swinging blindly, hitting their own comrades. It's chaotic, messy, and entirely undignified. If you've ever tried to cook with chili powder and accidentally rubbed your eye, imagine that sensation multiplied by 100 while wearing wool uniforms in a humid corridor. Now, you move, you drop from the rafters, or burst from the hidden side panels. This is close-quarters combat, the naginata's sweet spot if you use it right. You don't swing wide, There's no room. You use the Suki thrust. You drive the blade into the gaps in their armor, the armpits, the throat, the inner thighs. You strike and retreat before they can focus. You are stabbing at shadows in a smoke-filled room, but you don't stay to finish them off. That's how you get grabbed. You hit them, so confusion, and then you run. You lead them deeper into the trap. You sprint down a hallway you know by heart, leaping over specific floorboards. The soldiers chase you, their blood up. They see a fleeing woman and think easy target. They stomp onto the floorboards you avoided. Here is a quirky, fringe tidbit for your arsenal, makubishi. These are the Japanese version of caltrops, but unlike the metal ones used by ninjas in movies, the makubishi used in castle defense were often organic, specifically dried water, caltrop seeds, tropinatons. These seeds are naturally shaped like a devil's head, with 4 rock-hard, razor-sharp spikes. No matter how they land, one spike points up. They are nature's Legos, but evil. You scattered hundreds of them on the floor in this corridor. The soldiers, wearing warachi straw sandals or thin leather boots, scream as the spikes punch through their soles and into the soft arch of the foot. A man with a spike in his foot is a man who isn't chasing you anymore. He's a roadblock for everyone behind him. It's low-tech, brutal, and incredibly effective. It slows the assault from a sprint to a hobble. Historians still argue about the extent to which samurai women employed ninja tactics like poison, blinding powder, and traps. The traditional samurai code Bushido often frowned upon such deception as dishonorable. However, many scholars point out that the bukanana women of warrior families were trained to defend the home by any means necessary. Honor is a luxury for the battlefield. Inside the home, survival is the only rule. Did they use dirty tricks? Absolutely. When a Gatling gun is pointed at your living room, you don't challenge it to a duel. You throw pepper in its eyes and stab it in the knee. You lead the survivors of the footspick corridor into the false floor. Trap we discussed in section 6. You run across the center beam, balancing perfectly. They rush after you, hugging the walls for support. The floorboards on the edge flip. 3 soldiers disappear into the darkness below with a crash, landing in a dry moat filled with bamboo stakes. The remaining soldiers pause. They are spooked. The castle feels haunted. Every shadow holds a spear. Every floorboard is a trap. The psychological weight of the assault is shifting. They aren't fighting an army. They are fighting the architecture itself. You slip through a karakuri trick dora revolving section of wall that spins you into a hidden servant-â passage. You catch your breath in the dark. Your heart is hammering against your ribs like a trapped bird. You wipe sweat and plaster dust from your eyes. You check your naginata. The blade is wet. You've drawn blood, but you can hear them regrouping. The officers are shouting, whipping the men back into order. They are bringing up torches to burn away the shadows. They are smashing through the paper walls instead of following the corridors. They are learning. You realize that smoke and mirrors can only buy you time. It can't win the battle. You have slowed them down, bled them, and terrified them, but you haven't stopped them. The sheer mass of the Imperial army is pushing into the castle like water flooding a sinking ship. You can close a watertight door here and there, but the pressure is building. You hear the sound of heavy boots on the stairs above you. They have bypassed your traps on the ground floor and are climbing to the upper levels. They are heading for the inner sanctum, where the children and the elderly are hiding. Your guerrilla war is over. The deception phase has failed. You can no longer hide in the walls. You have to stand between them and the vulnerable. The fight is moving from the confusing corridors to the open spaces of the main chambers. It's about to stop being a game of cat and mouse and start being a brawl. You signal to your hairpin squad. They look ragged. Some are bleeding. The merchant's daughter has lost her spear and is clutching a heavy iron ladle, but their eyes are fierce. They have tasted combat, and they are still standing. Upstairs, you whisper, we hold the landing. You abandon the shadows and step back into the light of the stairwell. The traps are sprung. The tricks are used. Now it's just you, the steel in your hands, and the enemy coming up the stairs. The gates are breached, the walls are compromised, and the fight is about to get very, very personal. The traps were a stalling tactic, a finger in the dike. But you cannot hold back the ocean with a finger. The smoke and mirrors phase is over. The smoke has cleared, the mirrors are shattered, and the reality of your situation is crashing through the paper walls with the subtlety of a freight train. The enemy has realized that for every trap you set, they have 10 men to spring it. They are spending lives like currency, and they have a much bigger budget than you do. You are pushed back to the grand staircase of the keep. This is the gates breached in the truest sense. Not just the outer wooden doors, but the breach of your personal space, your safety zone. The fight is no longer tactical. It is a mosh pit of steel and desperation. The noise is the first thing that breaks you. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit about castle acoustics. Japanese castles were built with wood and plaster, materials that vibrate. In a normal setting, this created a warm, resonant sound for no theater or poetry readings. But filled with gunfire, screaming men, and clashing metal, the keep becomes a giant amplifier. It functions like the body of a violin, turning every scream into a deafening shriek that rattles your teeth. You can't hear orders, you can't hear warnings. You are fighting in a sonic blender. The enemy surges up the stairs. You are standing on the landing, looking down at a sea of upturned faces and bayonets. You swing your naginata in the open field. This weapon is a graceful dancer. Here in the crush, it is a glorious bludgeon. You catch a soldier in the neck with the blade, but before you can pull it back, another grabs the shaft. You aren't dueling, you are playing tug-of-war with a murder stick. You twist the shaft using the leverage of your hips, thank you, morning squats do, throw him off balance. You reverse your grip and drive the iron butt-cap Ishizuki into the face of the man behind him. There is a sickening crunch of cartilage. It's ugly, it's unrefined, it's survival. This is the reality of hand-to-hand combat that the poems don't mention. It smells. It smells of bowel releases, of sweat, of iron blood, and the sulfurous choke of black powder. It's slippery. The polished wood floors, usually kept pristine by socks, are now slick with blood. You watch a soldier slip and fall, not because of a trap, but because he stepped in his comrade. You don't hesitate. You strike him while he's down. There is no chivalry here. You are fighting side by side with the men of your clan now. This brings us to a significant scholarly debate. Historians have long argued about the spatial segregation of castle defense. Did women defend the inner chambers exclusively, while men held the outer walls, or did the lines blur in the final moments? The archaeological evidence from Aizu suggests the latter. Bodies of women were found mixed with men in the forward defensive positions. In the chaos of the breach, gender roles evaporated. A spear is a spear. If you could hold it, you were on the line. You see your cousin, a male retainer, fighting to your left. He is bleeding from a scalp wound, his face a mask of red. He catches your eye for a split second. There is no recognition of you as female or sister. You are just another blade keeping him alive. You cover his flank, he covers yours. The social hierarchy that dictated you walk 3 steps behind him has been obliterated. You are standing shoulder to shoulder, but the sheer mass of the Imperial Army is overwhelming. For every man you knock down the stairs, 2 more climb over him. They are swarming up the banisters. They are firing pistols at point-blank range. A bullet splinters the pillar next to your head, sending sharp wood chips into your cheek. You flinch, and in that second, a soldier lunges. His bayonet scrapes across your breastplate. The lacquered iron holds, but the force knocks the wind out of you. You stumble back. He prepares to thrust again, aiming for the gap at your neck. Before he can strike, a heavy ceramic vase smashes into his head. He drops like a stone. You look up to see the merchant's daughter, the one with the ladle standing there, chest heaving. She didn't use the ladle. She used a Ming Dynasty heirloom. "Nice shot," you gasp. "It was ugly anyway," she yells back. You rally the women, fall back. To the 3rd floor, you retreat up the stairs, fighting a rearguard action. You are trading space for time. Every step you give up is a step closer to the inner sanctum where the non-combatants are hiding. You are the buffer. As you reach the upper landing, the fighting changes dynamic again. The rooms are smaller here. The naginata is becoming a liability. It's too long to swing in the narrow doorways. You make the call, you drop the spear. It clatters to the floor, a loyal friend you have to abandon. You reach into your sash and pull out the K-can. This is terrifying. You have gone from having a 7-foot reach to a 6-inch reach. You have to get inside their guard. You have to get close enough to smell their breath. A soldier bursts through the paper screen door. He lunges with the sword. You step inside the arc of his swinga move that screams against every survival instinct you have. You grab his wrist with your left hand, locking it, and drive the dagger into the soft spot under his armpit with your right. He collapses on top of you. He is heavy, You have to shove his dead weight off you to stand up. You are covered in blood, and very little of it is yours. You look at your hands, they are trembling, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. Your muscles are firing on all cylinders, burning through glycogen stores you didn't know you had. Here is a mainstream historical fact. The fighting inside Aizu Castle was so intense that the walls were literally painted red. After the war, when the castle was being demolished, workers reported that the blood had soaked so deep into the floorboards that it couldn't be scrubbed out. They had to burn the wood. You are creating that legacy right now. You look around, the squad is fragmented. In the smoke and chaos, it's hard to tell who is who. The men of your clan are wearing similar armor to the enemy. Everyone is wearing dark blues and grays. Everyone is covered in dust. The red bear wigs of the officers are easy to spot, but the common soldiers look identical. You raise your dagger to strike a figure emerging from the gloom, only to stop inches from his face. It's your brother. He looks at you with wild eyes, his sword raised. He almost killed you. You almost killed him. Identify yourself, he screams, his voice cracking. It's me, you shout back. This is the new danger. In the claustrophobic, smoke-filled hell of the keep, friendly fire is a very real threat. You are all armored, you are all bloody, and you are all terrified. The visual markers of friend and foe are gone. The beautiful family crests on the armor are obscured by gore and soot. You realize you need a beacon. You need a way to mark the hairpin squad so that amidst the slaughter, you can find each other and so your own men don't cut you down by mistake. You need a signal that cuts through the smoke. You look at your sleeve. The white Tsuki cord you use to tie back your sleeves is stained gray, but it's still visible. It's not enough. You need something brighter. Something that signifies who you are and why you are fighting. You remember the rolls of white cotton you used for bandages. You grab a strip from a fallen medical kit, you tear it into lengths. Tie this on. You order the women around you. Tie it on your arm, on your weapon, anywhere, white on white. It's a crude solution, but it's all you have. The white ribbon isn't a surrender flag. It's a combat ID. It's the only thing that separates the living from the dead in this confusion. You tie the strip around your upper arm, pulling the knot tight with your teeth. The enemy is pounding on the doors of the third floor. The wood is cracking. You grip your dagger. You are cornered. You are outnumbered. But you are not done. The gates may be breached, but the spirit hasn't broken yet. You look at the women, the survivors. They are battered, bloody, and beautiful in their ferocity. If they want this room, you hiss. Make them pay for every inch of floorboard. The door explodes inward. The door to the third floor doesn't just open, it disintegrates. A volley of rifle fire punches through the wood, turning the lattice into a shower of splinters, followed by the heavy muffled thud of shoulders ramming against the frame. The enemy pours in like black water through a cracked dam. The room is instantly filled with the deafening roar of combat, a mix of guttural screams, the clack-clack of breech loaders being cycled, and the high-pitched ring of steel on steel. But amidst this swirling gray chaos of smoke and dust, you see them, the flashes of white, the strips of cloth you tied around your sleeves, the white ribbons are, cutting through the gloom like lighthouse beams. In the confusion of close quarters battle, where silhouettes blur and faces are hidden by masks or gore, that white strip is the only thing keeping you from stabbing your sister. It's a crude identification, friend or foe, IFF system, feudal style. When you see a white flash, you cover their back. When you don't, you strike. Here is a mainstream historical fact. The most famous female combat unit of the Boshin War. The Joshitai women's army, led by the legendary Nakano Takeko, famously wore white sashes or headbands to distinguish themselves on the battlefield. They didn't have matching uniforms. They wore a mix of civilian clothes and hakama. The white sash was the unifying symbol. It turned a ragtag group of defenders into a visual regiment. It told the enemy, we are together. It told the friendly forces, don't shoot us. You are fighting back to back with the merchant's daughter now. The white sash on her arm is already speckled with red, but it's there. The two of you have found a rhythm. She blocks a bayonet thrust with a heavy iron firehook, and you step in with the keikon, driving it into the attacker's exposed neck. It's a brutal, synchronized dance. You aren't communicating with words. You can't hear anything over the noise anyway. You are communicating through the ribbons. You track the white blur in your peripheral vision. As long as that white blur is moving, you know you aren't alone. but the color white carries a heavier meaning in your culture. And this brings us to the scholarly debate of the section. Why white? Historians and cultural anthropologists argue about the primary intent of these sashes. Was it purely tactical, for high visibility in the smoke? Or was it spiritual? In Japan, white is the color of death and purity. It is the color of the shinishizoku, the burial kimono. By wearing white, were these women signaling that they were tactical combatants, or were they signaling that they were already dead? The prevailing theory is that it was both. It was a declaration of intent. You weren't planning to come home. You were wearing your own shroud into battle. It's a psychological power move. Imagine fighting an opponent who is already dressed for their own funeral. It tells you that they have zero fear of death because they have already accepted it. It makes them incredibly dangerous. The fight in the room is devolving. The furniture you piled up as barricades is being dismantled or climbed over. The enemy soldiers are using their rifles as clubs. You duck under a swinging gun stock and slash at a soldier's legs. He falls, screaming. You catch a glimpse of a fellow white ribbon across the room, a younger girl, maybe 16. She is cornered by 2 imperial soldiers. You try to push toward her, but you are engaged with your own duel. You watch, helpless, as the white ribbon on her arm goes down. It vanishes into the massive dark uniforms. The beacon is extinguished. A cold spike of grief hits you, but you shove it down. Mourning is for later. Survival is for now. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit about battlefield identification. In the chaos of the Boshin War, identity confusion was so rampant that some warriors resorted to writing their names and allegiances on pieces of paper and pasting them to their armor with rice paste or even their own blood. These were called sodejirushi sleeve marks, but in the heat of battle, sweat and rain would wash the ink away, or the paper would tear. The white cloth sash, however, was durable. It didn't wash away. It absorbed the blood and dirt, but kept its stark contrast. It was the only brand that survived the mud. You realize that the room is lost. The enemy numbers are too great. For every soldier you drop, 3 more squeeze through the door. They are beginning to use the window's 2 climbing ladders from the courtyard and pouring in from the sides. You are being encircled. If you stay here, you die in a box. The white ribbons will just be markers on a pile of corpses. You need space. You need to move. You lock eyes with the unofficial leader of your group. Perhaps it's Nakano Takeko herself, or a woman just like her. She is a whirlwind of motion, her naginata, which she somehow held onto, spinning like a propeller. She cuts a path through the soldiers, her white headband glowing in the murky light. She points toward the side exit, a small service door that leads to the outer bridge. Outside, she screams, "Take the fight to them." It sounds insane. Leave the relative protection of the walls to go out into the open. But you realize the logic. Inside, their numbers crush you. Outside, you have room to maneuver. Outside, you can use the naginata properly. Outside, you can die under the sky instead of under a collapsing roof. You grab the merchant's daughter by the harness of her armor. "Move," you yell. You fight your way toward the door. It's a gauntlet. You are slashing, kicking, shoving. You feel a bayonet graze your shoulder, parting the chainmail and slicing the skin. It stings like a wasp, but the adrenaline masks the real pain. You are just a machine of forward momentum. As you burst through the service door and onto the wooden bridge that connects the keep to the outer ramparts, the change in atmosphere is shocking. The air is fresh, cold, and smells of pine mixed with gunpowder. The smoke is thinner here. You can breathe, but you are also exposed. You look around, about 20 of the hairpin squad have made it out. 20 women with white ribbons tied to their bloody armor, standing on a bridge, suspended over a burning courtyard. Below you, the main battle is raging. Above you, the sky is gray with smoke. You look at your sisters. They are panting, their chests heaving against the lacquered plates. Their faces are smeared with soot and blood. They look like demons. They look magnificent. The Imperial soldiers are spilling out of the door behind you, jamming the exit. They hesitate for a second, surprised to find you organized, surprised to find you waiting. You realize this is it. This is the moment the poems talk about. You aren't going to win this war. The castle is burning. The shogun has already lost, but you can choose how this ends. You can be hunted down in the hallways like rats, or you can become the hunters for one last, glorious minute. The leader raises her naginata. The white ribbon on her arm flutters in the wind. It's the only clean thing left in the entire castle. "For the Aizu," she screams. The cry is taken up by the 20 women. It's a primal sound, high and piercing, tearing through the roar of the cannons. It's the sound of the onna-bugeisha reclaiming their narrative. You tighten your grip on your weapon. You feel the zanshin, the remaining mind, sharpened to a razor point. You aren't defending anymore. You are attacking. You launch yourself off the wooden bridge and onto the hard-packed earth of the outer rampart. The air here is different. Inside the keep, it was stagnant, filled with the choking dust of plaster and Centura-sold secrets. Out here, under the gray smoke-choked sky, the air is moving. It feeds the fire in your lungs. You are screaming. It's not a scream of terror. It's a Kaya spirit shout intended to stun the enemy and harden your own resolve. You are part of a wedge formation, a flying V of white-sashed fury sprinting directly into the teeth of the Imperial Army. This is the charge of the Joshitai. It is one of those moments in history that feels like it belongs in a heavily CGI'd movie trailer. But it happened, and you are in the middle of it. The ground shakes under your feet. You are wearing waraji sandals or tabi socks, giving you traction that the enemy soldiers in their slippery leather boots don't have. You are faster than them. You are lighter than them. And right now, you are infinitely angrier than them. Here is a mainstream historical fact. This specific counterattack is the defining moment of the Aizu women, led by Nakano Takeko, a 21-year-old instructor of martial arts, who was reportedly beautiful, highly educated, and absolutely lethal. This ad hoc unit of women charged the Imperial lines near the Yanagi Bridge. They weren't just trying to escape, they were trying to break the siege lines to buy time for the clan's leadership to regroup or retreat. They were the distraction. They were the flare gun fired into a barrel of gasoline. The Imperial soldiers see you coming, and for a split second, they freeze. This brings us to the scholarly debate of the section. Why did they freeze? Some historians argue it was the shock of the Imperial troops, many of whom were conscripts from other domains, had never seen women in armor charging at them. It broke their mental model of warfare. War was supposed to be men shooting at men. Seeing a group of women with naginatas sprinting at them caused a momentary psychological short circuit. Others argue it was a hold-fire order given by confused officers who thought you might be non-combatant refugees fleeing the fire. Right up until the moment you started chopping heads off, that hesitation is your window. You close the distance. A rifle is a terrifying weapon at 100 yards. At 100 feet, it's dangerous. But inside 10 feet, it's just a clumsy metal club. You are inside the 10-foot rule. You engage. The combat is frenetic. You aren't dueling, you are mowing. You use the length of the naginata to sweep the legs of the front rank. Sweep, recover, strike. It's the rhythm you learned in the dojo. But now the resistance isn't a straw dummy. It's bone and muscle. The blade sings through the air. You catch a soldier on the shoulder, the curved blade biting through his uniform and collarbone. He goes down, you step over him, driving forward. The white ribbons around you are a blur of motion. You see Nakano Takeko at the tip of the spearhead. She is fighting like a demon. She deflects a bayonet thrust with the shaft of her weapon and counters with a slash so fast it's almost invisible. She is the eye of the hurricane. Following her feels less like military service and more like religious worship. The sheer violence of the charge pushes the Imperial line back. They stumble. They trip over each other. They are panicked by the ferocity of this hairpin squad. You are reclaiming ground. For a brief, intoxicating moment, you think, we can do this. We can actually win. But then, the reality of the era catches up with you. The soldiers in the back ranks aren't looking at your eyes or your white sashes. They are just looking at targets. They raise their rifles, crack, crack, crack. The sound is different out here. It's sharper. You hear the buzz of the mini-balls flying past your head like angry hornets. The woman to your right, mother of 3 who made excellent pickled radishes jerks violently and falls. There is no dramatic speech. She just drops, her white sash instantly stained red. You don't stop. You can't. If you stop, you die. You step over her body and thrust your weapon into the next enemy. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit about this charge. Many of the women, including Nakano Takeko, carried death poems tucked into their armor. In the samurai tradition, it was considered classy to write a poem before you died, summarizing your life or your philosophy. Takeko's poem read, "I would not dare to count myself among all the famous warriors. Even though with the brave heart of a warrior, I join the battle, imagine the level of composure required to write a humble brag poem about how you are untold famous warrior. Fold it up, put it in your pocket, and then go out and become the most famous female warrior of the century. It's a level of doing it for the content that modern influencers can only dream of. You are breathless. The physical exertion is immense. Your armor feels like it weighs 1,000 pounds. Your lungs are burning from the smoke and the sprinting, but you have achieved the objective. The Imperial troops are focused entirely on you. They have stopped shelling the main keep. They have stopped advancing on the rear gate. All eyes and all guns are on the women on the bridge. You have bought the clan time. Maybe it's 10 minutes, maybe it's an hour. Time for the Lord to escape. Time for the wounded to be moved. Time for the elderly to perform their final rites with dignity rather than being butchered in their beds. You are the currency being spent to purchase those minutes. The melee is brutal. You parry a rifle but aimed at your face. The impact jars your arms, vibrating up to your shoulders. You spin the naginata, using the momentum to slam the butt end into the soldier's gut. He doubles over. You don't finish him. You have to pivot because another one is coming. It's a 360-degree nightmare. You are surrounded by blue uniforms. The white ribbons are getting fewer. The wedge formation has shattered into individual desperate duels. You catch a glimpse of the merchant's daughter again. She is swinging that iron ladle with hysterical strength, battering a soldier who lost his weapon. It's absurd and heroic, but the enemy officers have recovered from their shock. They are screaming orders. Form ranks, volley fire. They are pulling back, creating a gap. This is bad. In hand-to-hand combat, you have a chance. If they create distance, they can use the guns. Charge them. Nakano Takeko screams. She knows that if they separate, it's over. She sprints toward the officers, trying to close the gap before they can organize a firing line. You follow her. You are running on pure instinct now. Your legs are numb. Your vision is tunneling. All you see is the back of the white sash in front of you and the red bare wigs of the enemy officers. You see a soldier raise his rifle, aiming not at you, but at Takeko. You shout a warning, but your voice is lost in the roar. Bang! The shot rings out, distinct and terrible. You watch as the leader of the Joshitai stumbles. It's not a dramatic movie fall. It's a sudden loss of mechanics. The bullet hits her in the chest. She drops to one knee, using her naginata to prop herself up. The charge falters. The momentum evaporates instantly. The invincibility of the hairpin squad is shattered by a single piece of lead. You skid to a halt, sliding in the mud. The women around you stop. The silence that follows the shot is heavier than the gunfire. The Imperial soldiers lower their rifles slightly, watching. Even they seem to recognize that something momentous has just happened. Takeko looks up. She is pale, blood blossoming across the white ties of her armor. She looks at her sister Yuko, who is fighting beside her. She doesn't ask for a medic. She doesn't ask for help. She whispers a command that chills your blood, even in the heat of battle. She knows what the enemy does to the heads of famous warriors. They take them as trophies. They parade them, and she refuses to let that happen. "Cut it off," she gasps. "Take my head. Don't let them have it." You stand there, the wind whipping the smoke around your legs. The charge is over. The glory is fading. Now comes the horror. You are standing in the mud, surrounded by an army, watching a sister prepare to perform the ultimate act of mercy for another. The rifle versus the blade has played out, and the rifle won, but the spirit that is still being contested. The moment Nakano Takeko hits the mud, the spell breaks. The divine wind that seemed to be pushing you forward suddenly dies, replaced by the leaden reality of physics. You are standing on a bridge in the middle of a killing field, holding a stick with a knife on the end, staring down the barrel of the Industrial Revolution. You watch, time seemingly slowing down to an agonizing crawl as Takeko's sister Yuko drops her weapon. She isn't panicking. She is responding to that final whispered command. She draws her own sword. In the middle of a firefight, with bullets snapping the air around her like bullwhips, she performs the gruesome duty of a Kishikunina second. She takes the head. It is a frantic hacking motion, not the clean, ritualized cut of a ceremonial seppuku. It has to be fast. She grabs the hair the long-haired Takeko refused to cut tanned, wraps the head in her own white sash. She runs. She doesn't run away from the battle. She runs toward the temple, carrying the head of her commander like a sacred relic, desperate to bury it before the enemy can claim it as a trophy. You want to vomit? You want to scream, but you can't. You are the rear guard now. You have to buy her time. You turn back to the enemy, raising your naginata, screaming a challenge that sounds thin and pathetic against the roar of the guns. And then, the rhythm of the battle changes. The scattered pop-up of the rifles is joined by a new sound. It's a low, grinding mechanical growl, like a giant coffee grinder crunching bones. Crank, crank, crank. Here is a mainstream historical fact. The imperial forces at Aizu possessed a few units of the Gatling gun. Invented by Dr. Richard Gatling in 1861, this weapon was capable of firing 200 rounds per minute. To put that in perspective, a skilled samurai archer might loose 12 arrows a minute. A rifleman might get off 3 or 4 shots. The Gatling gun put a bullet in the air every fraction of a second. It didn't aim at individuals. It mowed grass. It was a weapon of area denial. Dr. Gatling, in a twist of grim irony, actually invented the gun for humanitarian reasons. He believed that if a weapon was so terrible and efficient that one man could do the work of 100, it would reduce the size of armies and therefore reduce the number of deaths. Talk about a miscalculation. Instead of ending war, he just made it industrial. And right now, you are the raw material being fed into his machine. You see the dirt kicking up in a line, moving toward you like a splashing wave. It's a stream of bullets chewing up the ground. You dive. You don't dive gracefully. You faceplant into the mud, the heavy armor slamming into your ribs. The line of bullets stitches the air where your head was a second ago. The wood of the bridge railing behind you explodes into splinters. The woman next to you, one of the few remaining white ribbons, doesn't dive fast enough. The sound of the impact is wet and heavy. She is thrown backward as if yanked by an invisible rope. You are pinned. You are lying in the mud, face pressed against the cold earth, listening to the mechanical whir of the gun. This is the death of the samurai, right here. It isn't a duel with a worthy opponent. It isn't a clash of wills. It's geometry. If you stand up, you occupy a space that is currently occupied by lead. Therefore, you cannot stand up. Your decades of training, your calligraphy, your meditation, your honor, none of it matters to the math of the Gatling gun. This brings us to the scholarly debate of the section. Historians and military analysts have long argued about the effectiveness of traditional Japanese armor against modern firearms. For a long time, the assumption was that samurai armor was useless against bullets, paper, and wood, they sneered. But modern ballistics testing has shown that Tossaka Soku, modern armor made of iron plates, could actually stop glancing blows from matchlocks or pistol fire. It was designed to deflect. However, against the conical mini-balls fired by the Imperial rifles, specifically the Snyder Enfield breechloaders, the armor is worse than useless. It's a liability. Here is why. When a high-velocity lead bullet hits a rigid iron plate that it can penetrate, it doesn't just punch a hole, it spalls. It shatters the metal, sending fragments of your own armor into your body along with the bullet. The armor turns into shrapnel. You are literally wearing a claymore mine pointed at your own organs. You realize this as you lie there. The shell you spent an hour putting on, the shell that made you feel invincible, is now a trap. You are heavy, slow, and covered in metal that will kill you if it gets hit. You are a turtle on a highway. The fringiest, quirkiest tidbit of this nightmare is the medical reality of the wounds being inflicted. The old round musket balls used to break bones. Sure, but the new mini balls were designed to expand. When they hit soft tissue, they mushroomed out, creating massive exit wounds. The Japanese medical texts of the time, which were used to treating clean sword cuts or arrow punctures, had no idea how to deal with the hydrostatic shock of high-velocity rounds. Survivors of these battles often spoke of ghost sickness, the shock and infection that killed you 3 days after you were grazed. You aren't just fighting for your life. You are fighting to avoid a slow septic death in a castle that has run out of bandages. The Gatling gun jams. You hear the rhythm stutter and stop. Someone shouts a curse in a dialect you barely recognize. Satsuma dialect, harsh and guttural. Move! You scream. You scramble to your feet. You are covered in mud, looking less like a warrior and more like a swamp creature. You grab the collar of a fallen sister, trying to drag her. She's dead weight. You can't save her. You have to let go. That choice to let go of the dead to save the living tears at your soul more than the shrapnel ever could. You retreat, The glorious charge has turned into a rout. You are sprinting back across the bridge, back toward the burning gate of the castle. The hairpin squad is decimated. Of the 20 who went out, maybe 6 are running back with you. You burst back into the courtyard. It's an inferno. The shelling has started again, now that the infantry has pulled back. The keep is groaning, the timbers screaming as the fire eats away at the structural supports. You collapse against a stone wall, gasping for air. Your lungs feel like they are filled with broken glass. You look at your naginata. The blade is chipped, the shaft is splintered. It looks like a toy. You look at the white ribbon on your arm. It's gray and stiff with dried blood. The romanticism is gone. You have seen the face of the new era, and it is ugly. It is efficient. It has no code. The samurai fought for names, for lineage, for the honor of the house. The imperial army fights for a nation-state, for an abstract concept of progress, and they are doing it with machines that don't care who your grandfather was. You look at the women who made it back. They are huddled together, shaking. The adrenaline dump is hitting them. One is vomiting. Another is staring at her empty hands, realizing she left her weapon on the field. You slide down the wall until you are sitting in the dirt. You are alive, but you realize, with a cold sinking clarity, that survival was the punishment, not the reward. You survived to see the end. You survived to see your leader beheaded in the mud. You survived to realize that the blade, the soul of the samurai, is broken. The enemy is regrouping. They will come again, and this time they won't be surprised. This time, they will bring the guns closer. You look up at the smoke-filled sky. The sun is trying to break through a pale, sickly disk. It looks like a dying eye. You have retreated back into the womb of the castle, but the castle is dying too. There is nowhere left to run. The physical battle is lost, the tactical battle is lost. Now, the only battle left is the spiritual one. You have to decide how you leave this world. The rifle has won the day, but you can still determine who wins the night. You look at your kakan dagger, still tucked in your sash. It survived the charge. It survived the Gatling gun. It is waiting for its true purpose. The wind shifts, blowing the smoke into your face. It smells of roast meta smell you will never, ever forget. You close your eyes for a second, just to escape the visual horror. When you open them, the decision has been made. You aren't going to wait for the machine to come get you. You are going to take matters into your own hands. You retreat from the outer ramparts, dragging your battered body back into the inner residence. The noise of the battle has dulled to a constant throbbing headache. The adrenaline that fueled your charge across the bridge has evaporated, leaving behind a cold, terrifying clarity. You know the math. The walls are breached. The defenders are dead or dying. The ammunition is gone. The castle is going to fall, probably within the hour. You enter the main hall of the women's quarters. It is quiet here, disturbingly so. The frantic activity of the logistics squad has stopped. The women your mother, your aunts, the grandmothers, the young daughters are no longer making rice balls or sharpening spears. They are sitting on the tatami mats in their finest white robes. They have changed out of their work clothes. They have put on their shiromukutha white kimono of the bride, which is also the kimono of the corpse. This is the room where the final battle will be fought, but it won't be fought with spears. It will be fought with will. You realize with a sinking heart that you have walked into a mass funeral that has unhappened yet. The decision has been made. Rather than face capture, rape, and humiliation at the hands of the imperial soldiers who are rumored to be looting and pillaging. Indiscriminately, the women of the household have chosen to depart on their own terms. This is jigai. Here is a mainstream historical fact that is often overshadowed by the male version of the ritual. While men committed seppuku disembowelment to restore honor, women committed jigai primarily to preserve purity and prevent capture. The method was different. A woman did not cut her belly, she cut her throat. Specifically, she severed the carotid artery and the jugular vein. It was faster than seppuku, which could take hours of agonizing pain, but it required a terrifying amount of precision and anatomical knowledge. If you missed the artery and hit the windpipe, you would drown in your own blood while suffocating. It was a high-stakes exit. You watch as your aunt prepares. She is calm. She kneels on the tatami, facing the direction of the imperial palace in Kyoto, offering a final, confusing gesture of loyalty to the emperor, even as his army burns her home. She takes a piece of heavy silk cord. Her obugai man wraps it around her ankles. This is the most heartbreaking detail of the ritual, and it is unique to the onna-bugeisha. She ties her legs together tightly. Why? Because in death, the muscles convulse, the body thrashes. She is terrified that in her final moments, her legs might kick out, causing her kimono to fall open and exposing her legs to the enemy soldiers who will find her body. Even in the face of violent death, the social conditioning of modesty is so powerful that she is worried about a stranger seeing her shins. She is binding her body to ensure she dies in a dignified posture. It is a level of discipline that feels almost alien to the modern mind. You look around the room. It is the residence of the senior retainer, Seigo Tenamo. This is a real historical event you are witnessing. In the actual fall of Aizu, Seigo's wife, Chiko, gathered her mother-in-law, her sisters, and her 5 daughters. The youngest was 7. They didn't wait for the soldiers. They sat in a circle. Chiko gave the youngest children the dagger first, guiding their hands because they were too small to do it themselves. This brings us to the scholarly debate of the section. How voluntary was this? Historians and sociologists argue fiercely about the agency of these women. Were they brainwashed by a patriarchal death cult that valued female purity over female life? Or was this the ultimate act of defiant adencia? Refusal to be objectified? A refusal to become a spoil of war? Did they die because they were told to? Or did they die because it was the only way to flip the bird to an enemy that wanted to own them? Standing there, covered in mud and blood, you feel the complexity of it. It feels like a tragedy, yes, but looking at their faces, determined, tear-stained, but steely, it also feels like a rebellion. They are denying the enemy the satisfaction of their fear, but there is a practical horror here too. The head in samurai warfare, the head is the currency. A warrior's head is proof of a kill. It is taken, washed, presented to the commander, and mounted on a spike or a board for inspection. It is a trophy. And for a famous onna-bugeisha, or a high-ranking lady of the clan, the head is a high-value item. It would be gawked at, sketched by war artists, and possibly mocked. So, the final request is often not save me, but hide me. You see a wounded woman beckoning to you. It's a friend you grew up with. She has already made the cut. She is bleeding out, her face pale as the white walls. She can't speak, but she gestures frantically to her neck and then to the fire burning in the hearth. Or perhaps she points to the garden, to the soft earth under the veranda. She wants you to take her head and bury it, or burn it, anything to stop them from having it. This is the quirky fringe tidbit, though quirky is the wrong word, it's macabre. There are accounts of women who, upon finding the bodies of their suicides, would purposefully disfigure the faces of their loved ones to make them unidentifiable to the enemy. Imagine the love required to smash the face of your sister with a rock so that she can remain anonymous in death. It is a grim, brutal form of protection. You aren't saving her life, you are saving her ghost. You kneel beside your aunt. She hands you the keikan, the same dagger you carried in your sash since you were 6 years old. The guardian sword, it has guarded you all this time, but now its job is to set you free. Do not hesitate, she whispers. The water is rising. The water she refers to is the sound of boots in the hallway. The enemy is inside the residence. You can hear them smashing the screens, looting the rooms. You hear a scream from the outer corridor, someone who didn't make the decision fast enough. That scream seals it for you, but you, you are a warrior. You didn't just sit in the room, you fought on the bridge. You have the blood of the enemy on your hands. Does the warrior choose jigai, or does she fight until she is cut down? You look at the dagger. You look at the door. There is a third option, one that some onna-bugeisha took. You don't kill yourself, you turn the dagger outward. You wait, you play dead amongst the bodies of your kin, covering yourself in their blood. And when the first soldier kneels down to check your corpse for lutsu, steal the gold hairpin or the silk sashu, put the knife in his eye, it is a suicide attack. It is jigai with a body count. You grip the keikan, your knuckles are white. The smell of iron in the room is overpowering. It smells like a butcher shop, but the silence is like a cathedral. You see the poem written on the sliding screen door by one of the younger girls before she died. The leaves fall, but the tree remains. Do not weep for the falling leaf. You aren't weeping, you are calculating. You start to bind your legs. You use your tsuki cord. You pull it tight, cutting off the circulation. You feel the finality of the knot. It's a physical period at the end of the sentence of your life. You check the edge of the blade. It is sharp. But then, a shadow falls across the shoshi screen, a silhouette, a rifle but smashes through the paper. The time for ritual is over. The enemy is here. You have to decide in a split second, the throat or the lunge, the dignified end or the violent one. You look at the women in the room, the white tiger silent army of the dead. They are waiting for you to join them. But the fire in your belly, the one you kindled in the freezing dawn training, hasn't gone out yet. You stand up, you untie your legs. Not yet, you whisper. You are not going to die on the floor. You are going to die standing up. You are going to make them work for this head. You are standing in the blood-slicked hallway, the cock and dagger gripped in your hand, your legs unbound, ready to lunge at the first soldier who steps through the broken screen. Your heart is a drum beating out a final frantic rhythm. You are prepared for the end. You are prepared for the pain. You are prepared to become a ghost. But the end doesn't come with a bang. It comes with a bell. From the central courtyard, a sound cuts through the roar of the fire and the crackle of rifle fire. It is the Hanshotha fire bell, but it isn't ringing the alarm. It is ringing a slow, rhythmic toll. Gong, ... gong, ... gong. And then, you hear the voice. It's a town crier, or perhaps a herald from the inner keep, screaming until his voice breaks. Stop, cease fire. By order of the Lord, stand down. The command hits you harder than a bullet. It physically staggers you. Your brain, wired for hypervigilance, cannot process the sudden breaking. Stand down, after the dead on the bridge, after the suicide circle in the next room, after the months of starvation and the hairpin squads and the white ribbons. You watch as the Imperial soldiers in the doorway lower their rifles. They look as confused as you are. They were ready to bayonet you. Now they are awkwardly checking their safety catches. The tension in the room is thick enough to choke on. It's the silence of a suspended execution. You walk translite to the window war, the hole in the wall where the window used to be. You look out at the main tower, the Enshu. Here is a mainstream historical fact. On November 6, 1868, by the lunar calendar, the Aizu domain officially surrendered. The Lord Matsudara Katamori, the man your family swore to protect for generations, ordered the white flag raised. But they didn't have a proper flag. Legend says they used a white kimono, or perhaps a large sheet used for sifting flour, painted with the characters for surrender. Seeing that makeshift flag flapping amidst the smoke of the burning dungeon is the defining image of the fall of the samurai north. It wasn't a glorious sunset, it was a dirty sheet waving in the wind. You look at the dagger in your hand, the guardian sword. It feels incredibly heavy now. If you use it, it's no longer combat, it's treason against your lord's final order. If you don't use it, you are a prisoner. The logic of the warrior class traps you one last time. Obedience is absolute. If the Lord says live, you have to live, even if living feels like a fate worse than death. You drop the knife. The sound of it hitting the wooden floor clatter is the sound of your world ending. It's a small sound, insignificant compared to the artillery, but it signals the collapse of a 260-year-old social order. The surrender ceremony is a blur of humiliation. You are herded out of the castle, not as warriors, but as cattle. The men are stripped of their swords, the souls they have carried since their coming gaffage ceremonies. You watch your father, or your brother, hand over his katana to a peasant conscript from the south. The conscript doesn't bow. He just tosses the blade onto a pile like it's scrap metal. That disrespect burns hotter than the fire, consuming the keep, and the keep is burning. The Imperial forces, fearing that renegade elements might try to reoccupy the fortress, or perhaps just out of spite, ensure the destruction is total. The flames lick up the sides of the 7-story tower. The white plaster turns black. The copper tiles on the roof turn green, and then melt, dripping like wax. This brings us to the quirky, fringe tidbit of the section. The shelling of Aizu was so intense, and the subsequent fire so hot, that for decades afterwards, the trees surrounding the castle were known as lead mines. Locals would literally chop down the old pines and boil the wood too. Extract the lead from the thousands of bullets embedded in the trunks. The wood of your home didn't just burn, it became heavy with the weight of the enemy's hatred. You are watching a forest that will poison axe blades for a century. As you march out, you walk past the Vermilion Gate. It is pockmarked with holes. You walk past the bodhies. The Imperial soldiers haven't cleared them yet. You see the white ribbons lying in the mud. You see the red bear wigs of the victors. They are laughing. They are eating rice balls, from the stores you rationed so carefully. You are gathered in a holding area, a muddy field fenced off with rope. The men are separated from the women. You search the crowd for familiar faces. You see the merchant's daughter. She is missing an arm, her sleeve pinned up, but she is standing. You see the old grandmother, the one who sharpened the bamboo stakes. She is sitting on a rock, staring at nothing. Historians still argue about the severity of the Aizu punishment. Was Aizu made a scapegoat? The consensus is a resounding yes. While other domains that fought against the emperor were let off with fines or reduced lands, Aizu was dismantled. The name Aizu was erased from the map for a time. The survivors were exiled to the frozen, barren northern tip of Honshu modern-day Aomori to a place called Tonami. It was a concentration camp strategy in all but name. The government wanted to make an example of you. They wanted to show that the samurai era wasn't just over, it was dead and buried in the frozen mud. But in this moment, standing in the mud, watching your home burn, you aren't thinking about geopolitics. You are thinking about the silence. The guns have finally stopped. The screaming has stopped. All you can hear is the crackle of the fire and the low weeping of the women around you. It is a 0 hour. You have no home, you have no weapons, you have no status. You are no longer an onna-bugeisha. You are just a refugee in your own country. A rough hand shoves you. An imperial soldier is barking orders. To the temples, they are moving the women to local temples for confinement. You stumble forward, your arm of the gusoku. You spent hours lacing up his cut off you. The cords are slashed. The plates fall to the ground. You are left in your underrobes, shivering in the autumn chill. You feel naked. You feel light. You look back one last time at Tossaka Castle. The main keep, the Tenshu, gives a final groan. The support beams snap. The massive structure collapses inward in a shower of sparks and smoke. It looks like a giant beast dying. You realize that you are witnessing the physical funeral of the Middle Ages. The castle was the symbol of the feudal system, hierarchical, defensive, rigid. Its destruction by modern artillery is the perfect metaphor. The vertical world of the samurai has been flattened by the horizontal trajectory of the bullet. You turn away. You can't watch it anymore. You walk toward the temple gates, your feet dragging in the dirt. The hairpin squad is no more. The white ribbons are trampled in the muck. But as you walk, you feel a strange, hard lump in your sash. You reach in. It's the kakon. You dropped it, didn't you? No. In the confusion, in the haze of the surrender, you must have instinctively picked it back up and hidden it. Or perhaps you grabbed another one. It's a reflex, a habit. You shouldn't have it. If they find it, they might shoot you, but you don't throw it away. You slide it deeper into the folds of your ruined clothes. The castle has fallen. The clan has surrendered. The war is lost. But as long as you have this piece of steel against your skin, the onna-bugeisha isn't entirely dead. She is just going underground. The sun sets, casting a blood-red glow over the ruins. The night of the samurai is over. The long, cold night of survival is just beginning. The war is over, but the dying hasn't stopped. It has just become quieter. The artillery has been replaced by the slow, grinding silence of starvation and exposure. You are no longer a defender of a castle. You are a number on a prisoner manifest. You are a refugee in your own country, being herded north toward a place that sounds like a death sentence. Tonami, you are standing on the deck of a transport ship or perhaps walking the long frozen road headed for the northern tip of Honshu. The imperial government, in a fit of vindictive benevolence, has granted the defeated Aizu clan a new territory. They call it a fresh start. You call it Siberia, with better scenery. The land is volcanic, acidic, and frozen for half the year. It cannot grow rice, it can barely grow weeds. But this is where you live now. You look at your hands. The calluses from the naginata are still there, hard ridges of skin that tell a story you can no longer speak aloud. This is the new game. Hide the warrior. In the immediate aftermath of the surrender, the imperial investigators moved through the camps like sharks. They were looking for the leaders, the instigators, and the deviants. A woman who fought on the front lines falls into that last category. To the new Meiji government, you are an embarrassment. You disrupt the narrative of the civilized war they are trying to sell to the Western powers. A woman with a spear is a relic of a barbarous past they want to erase. So, you lie. How did you get that scar on your shoulder? An officer asks, pointing to the bayonet graze. I fell while carrying water, you say, bowing low, making your voice small and trembling. You channel every ounce of the demure lady training you used to hate. You weaponize your submission. You realize that the patriarchy you chafed against is now your best camouflage. They want to believe you are weak, so you play the part of the victim perfectly. It's the performance of a lifetime, and the reviews are life or death. Here is a mainstream historical fact. The exile to Tonami was brutal. The Aizu survivors arrived in the dead of winter with almost no supplies. They were forced to build shelters out of whatever they could find. Many lived in dugouts, literally holes in the ground covered with straw mats. Disease ran rampant. Cholera and smallpox finished what the Gatling guns started. It is estimated that nearly 20% of the exiled population died within the first few years. It wasn't a resettlement, it was a Slomosha purge. You are living in one of these dugouts. It smells of damp earth and unwashed bodies. You, who used to wear silk and worry about the correct angle of a flower arrangement, are now fighting rats for a stray potato. It's a humbling experience, in the same way that falling off a cliff is a humbling experience. But the onna-bugeisha spirit hasn't vanished. It has just been repurposed. You apply the same discipline to survival that you applied to war. You wake up before dawn not to train, but to break the frozen ground. You use the Zanshin remaining mind awareness to spot wild edible plants or to catch fish in the icy streams. This brings us to the quirky, fringe tidbit of the section. Desperate for metal to make farming tools, many samurai families had to make the heartbreaking choice to repurpose their weapons. There are stories of naginata blades ancient, family heirlooms forged by master smiths being taken off their shafts, heated in crude fires, and hammered into hoes or scythes. Imagine using a sword that defended your family for 300 years to chop turnips. It's the ultimate swords into plowshares moment, but it feels like a sacrilege. Every time you strike the dirt, you feel the ghost of the weapon wince. You also have to deal with the new order. The Meiji government is modernizing rapidly. They are banning the old ways. The Heitorei Edict will soon ban the wearing of swords entirely. The top knot is out, the Western haircut is in. The kimono is being swapped for trousers and dresses. You are walking around in a world that is actively trying to gaslight you into believing your past never happened. You encounter other survivors in the market or the fields. You recognize them not by their faces, but by their movements. The way a woman pivots her hips when she lifts a heavy basket, that's a jujitsu stance. The way she holds a broom, that's a spear grip. You exchange glances, a slight nod, a white ribbon of understanding that is invisible to everyone else. You are members of a secret society of heavy gardeners, but there is a danger in these memories. The trauma of the siege is fresh. Loud noises make you flinch. The smell of smoke makes you nauseous. You are dealing with PTSD in an era before therapy, where the prescribed cure for mental anguish is suck it up and work harder. And then there is the assimilation debate, which historians still argue about today. Did the women of the samurai class eagerly adopt the new Western ways to regain status, or did they form a silent resistance? Some scholars point to the high number of former samurai daughters who became teachers and educators in the Meiji era as a sign of adaptation. They transferred their Bun literary skills to the new school system. Others argue that inside the home, behind closed doors, they kept the Bu martial alive, teaching their sons and daughters the old codes in secret, creating a generational time capsule of values that would resurface in the 20th century. You fall into the latter camp. You might be wearing a cotton work kimono and digging for yams, but inside your head, you are still manning the ramparts. You teach your children. You don't teach them how to kill. The world has enough killers, but you teach them gamen. Endurance. You tell them the stories of the castle, but you whisper them like ghost stories. You tell them about the hairpin squad, not as a tragedy, but as a legend. You find work to survive. Maybe you teach writing to the children of the farmers who used to bow to you. It's humiliating, sure. You are serving the class you used to rule. But you swallow your pride because pride doesn't fill a rice bowl. You remember the lesson of the bamboo bend. One day, a government official comes to the settlement. He is wearing a Western suit and a bowler hat. He looks ridiculous, like a penguin. He is taking a census. He asks for your name and your husband's profession. Farmer, you say. He looks at your hands. He sees the scars. He looks at your eyes. There is something there that unnerves him, a coldness, a depth that the local peasant women don't have. He marks down farmer in his book, but he steps back a little when you reach for your hoe. He knows. On some primal level, he knows that if he pushes you, You could kill him with that gardening tool before he could tip his hat. You watch him walk away. You feel a strange sense of power. They stripped you of your armor, your castle, and your title. They burned your home and exiled your family. But they couldn't take the training. They couldn't surgically remove the muscle memory. You are a weapon in retirement, rusting perhaps, but still sharp under the dirt. Night falls over the Tonami wasteland. The wind howls, sounding eerily like the scream of incoming shells. You huddle under thin blankets with your family. You are cold, hungry, and exhausted, but you are alive, and in the logic of the onna-bugeisha, survival is the ultimate act of defiance. You didn't die on the tatami mat. You didn't die on the bridge. You are here, breathing, a living archive of a world that has officially ceased to exist. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you aren't in a frozen dugout. You are back in the dojo, the morning sun hitting the polished floor, the naginata light in your hands. You are young, strong, and unbroken. You hold on to that image. It is the only treasure you have left to smuggle into the future. The war of swords is over, but the war of ink has just begun. And if you thought the Gatling guns were effective at wiping people out, wait until you see what a government-mandated history textbook can do. You are now living in the Meiji-Iritha era of enlightened rule. The country is modernizing at breakneck speed. Steam trains are connecting the cities, telegraph lines are buzzing with news, and men are wearing top hats. Japan is desperate to prove to the West that it is a civilized nation, equal to Britain or France. And to build this new shiny future, they have to bulldoze the past. Specifically, your past. You are an old woman now. You sit on the porch of a modest house, watching your grandchildren walk to school. They are carrying books. If you were to open those books, you wouldn't find your name. You wouldn't find the hairpin squad. You wouldn't find the charge at Yanagi Bridge. Here is a mainstream historical fact that is chilling in its efficiency. For years after the Boshin War, the bodies of the Aizu defenders were not allowed to be buried. The imperial government ordered them to be left rotting in the fields as a warning to anyone who would dare oppose the emperor. It was a calculated desecration. The enemies of the Korchiteki were denied the final dignity of a grave. When permission was finally granted to bury them, the bodies were often dumped into mass graves with little ceremony. The heroes of your youth were treated like industrial waste, but the erasure of the onna-bugeisha goes deeper than just physical graves. It is ideological. The new Meiji government is importing Western values wholesale, including Victorian gender roles. They are crafting a new national ideal for women called Ryosai Kinbogud, wife, wise mother. In this new narrative, the ideal Japanese woman is a domestic angel. She supports the nation by raising healthy, patriotic sons and managing a thrifty household. She is gentle, submissive, and nurturing. Now, try to fit a woman who shaves her eyebrows, blackens her teeth, and decapitates soldiers with a glaive into that picture. You can't. You are a glitch in their matrix. You represent a version of femininity that is terrifyingly autonomous and violent. You are barbaric. You are a reminder of the backward feudal past that the government is frantically trying to hide from the Western powers. So, they edit you out. When the history of the Restoration is written, the Civil War becomes a simple story of the righteous imperial army versus the stubborn, foolish shogunate rebels. The women, if they are mentioned at all, they are painted as tragic victims who committed suicide to protect their virtue. The suicide narrative is safe. It fits the good wife model women dying to avoid shame. But the fighting narrative, the story of women charging a firing line that gets cut, it's too aggressive. It confuses the gender lines. This brings us to the scholarly debate of the section. Historians argue about the nature of this amnesia. Was it a deliberate conspiracy to disempower women? Or was it just a byproduct of the samurai class being abolished in general? The samurai were stripped of their status, their stipends, and their swords. The entire class was erased. But for men, the spirit of Bushido was eventually rehabilitated and turned into nationalistic propaganda for the modern army. For women, the martial spirit was surgically removed. The Bushido that was taught in schools became a boys' club. Women got home economics. You see this happening in real time. You hear the songs being sung. The Byakutai, the White Tiger Force, a unit of teenage boys who committed suicide on a hill overlooking the burning castle, are becoming national icons. Their tragedy is romanticized. They are the tragic heroes. But the Joshitai, the women's army, silence. It's as if Nakano Takeko never picked up a weapon. Her head, buried under a pine tree by her sister, is the only proof she existed. But memory is stubborn. It survives in the cracks. And this leads to the quirky, fringe tidbit of the section. Because the public worship of rebel spirits was banned or frowned upon, the memory of the Aizu warriors went underground. In the Aizu region, locals developed a deep, almost cult-like devotion to their fallen ancestors that persisted in secret. They held secret festivals. You might visit a small, nondescript shrine that is officially dedicated to a harvest god or a generic bodhisattva. But if you know the code, if you are a local you, know that the stone in the corner is untold harvest god. It's a grave marker for the women who died at the gate. You are praying to the hairpin squad under the guise of praying for good turnips. It's spiritual steganography. You watch your granddaughter practicing the koto harp. She is wearing a bright Western-style dress. She asks you about your scars once. "Grandmother, why is your arm twisted like that?" You pause. Do you tell her about the rifle butt? Do you tell her about the weight of the armor? Do you tell her that you once killed a man with a fruit knife? "I fell," you say. "I was clumsy." You lie to protect her. You lie because the truth is dangerous. You lie because, in this new world, being a warrior isn't a badge of honor. It's a sign of deviance. You let the silence swallow you. But the silence isn't empty. It's heavy. It weighs on the town of Aizu like a curse. The region remains economically depressed for decades, punished by the central government. Aizu becomes a synonym for traitor in Tokyo. If you are from Aizu, you don't mention it in job interviews. You hide your accent. You hide your history. Yet, there is a perverse irony here. By trying to bury the story so deep, the government actually preserved it. It's the Streisand effect of the 19th century. Because the story was uncoopted by the state. Because it was unturned into slick propaganda. Like the male samurai stories, it remained pure. It remained raw. It was kept alive in the oral traditions of the families who survived. You sit with the other old women, the survivors, at a tea gathering. You don't talk about the war, you talk about the weather. You talk about the price of rice. But then, someone pours the tea in a specific way, a wrist movement that mimics the chibury blood-clearing motion of a sword. You catch the eye of the woman across from you. She smiles, her teeth no longer black, but her eyes are old. You know, she knows. You are the keepers of the forgotten archive. You are living books that no one is allowed to read. The seasons change, the cherry blossoms fall, the Meiji Emperor dies, and the Taisho era begins. Then the Showa era. The world is marching toward new wars. Wars with tanks and airplanes. The samurai are ancient history now, reduced to costumes in period dramas. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls through the valley, you can still hear it. The thump of the artillery, the scream of the charge, the sound of silk tearing. The official history says you were a victim. The textbooks say you were a footnote. But you rub the scar on your arm, the one that throbs when it rains, and you know the truth. You weren't a footnote. You were the whole damn chapter. They just ripped the pages out. But paper burns, ink fades, bone remains, and buried in the soil of Aizu, beneath the new roads and the telephone poles, the bones of the onna-bugeisha are waiting. They are waiting for the world to cycle back around. They are waiting for a time when a woman with a spear isn't a monster, but a hero. You close your eyes, drifting into a nap in the sun. You are tired. It has been a long fight, first against the army, then against the starvation, and finally against the forgetting. You have won the first two. You aren't sure about the third, but as you drift off, you grip the arm of your chair like a weapon shaft. You hold the line, even in your sleep. The silence of the snowy north lasts for a long time, nearly a century. The history books gather dust. The graves are quietly tended by a few devoted locals, and the world moves on. Japan transforms from a feudal society into an industrial empire, then into a devastated post-war ruin, and finally into a neon-lit technological superpower. The hairpin squad sleeps beneath the earth, forgotten by the Tokyo bureaucrats and the Western historians. But history has a funny way of zombie-walking back into the spotlight when you least expect it. The resurrection doesn't start in a university lecture hall or a museum archive. It starts, weirdly enough, on a flat-screen TV. It is the early 21st century. You are walking through the streets of Akihabara, the electric heart of Tokyo's geek culture. You are surrounded by billboards for anime and video games, and there, staring down at you from a 3-story poster, is a girl. She has huge eyes, impossible hair, and she is holding ... A naginata, she is wearing a stylized, slightly sexualized version of the Aizu armor. It's onna-bugeisha as a pop idol. This is the samurai warrior's Sengoku Masu effect. Video game developers, desperate for new characters to add to their hack-and-slash rosters, started digging through the footnotes of history. They found the stories of Nakano, Takeko, Najima-ye, and Tomo Gozen. They dusted them off, gave them a CGI makeover, and put them in the hands of millions of teenagers. Suddenly, a generation of kids who slept through history class are obsessively memorizing the stats of 19th century female warriors. They are looking up the Boshin War on Wikipedia. They are making pilgrimages to Aizu, not to see the tragic sight of a massacre, but to see the birthplace of their favorite waifu. It is a bizarre, slightly uncomfortable, but undeniably effective resurrection. The quirky fringe tidbit here is the phenomenon of Rikyo history girls. This is a specific demographic of young Japanese women who are obsessed with samurai history. They don't want to be princesses, they want to be shinsengumi captains or Aizu defenders. They travel to old battlefields, buy replica swords, and engage in pilgrimages to the graves of warriors. It's a fandom that reclaimed the narrative. They looked at the good wife, wise mother model and said, "No thanks, I'd rather have a spear." But the biggest turning point of the moment, the onna-bugeisha truly stepped back into the mainstream sunlight, was the 2013 NHK taiga drama Yae no Sakura Yae's Cherry Blossom. Here is a mainstream historical fact. In Japan, the annual taiga drama is a cultural juggernaut. It's a year-long, big-budget historical epic that dictates tourism trends for the entire nation. In 2013, the show focused on Najima-ye, the Joan of Arc of the Bakumatsu. She was a gunnery expert in the defense of a Suwa woman who wore men's clothes, carried a Spencer repeating rifle, and fought on the walls. For decades, she had been a footnote. The TV show turned her into a national hero. You watch the transformation of Azuwawakatsu. The town, once shamed as a rebel nest, is suddenly flooded with tourists. The lead mines forest is now a hiking trail. The castle, reconstructed in concrete in the 1960s, is renovated to look like it did in 1868, complete with the red roof tiles, and the narrative flips. The Aizu warriors aren't traitors anymore. They are loyalists who stuck to their principles. The women aren't tragic victims. They are empowered defenders. You stand on the sidewalk during the Aizu Autumn Festival. It is the largest samurai parade in the world. You hear the drums, you see the horses, and then you see them. A phalanx of women dressed in hakama, white headbands tied around their foreheads, naginatas resting on their shoulders. They aren't actors. They are local high school students, mothers, and grandmothers. They are the descendants of the hairpin squad. They march with a solemn pride that cuts through the festive atmosphere. When they shout the battle cry, it echoes off the modern office buildings, a sound that hasn't changed in 150 years. But with this popularity comes the inevitable scholarly debate. Is this Disneyfication of the onna-bugeisha respectful? Historians argue that the pop culture version washes away the grit. It focuses on the cool factor, the guns, the armor, the badass one-liners, and glosses over the starvation, the mass suicides, and the grim reality of the jigai rituals. Are we celebrating their courage, or are we just consuming their trauma as entertainment? It's the Hamilton problem. You take a messy, complex, bloody piece of history and turn it into a catchy, consumable product. The action hero version of Nakano Takeko doesn't show her head being sawed off by her sister. It shows her striking a pose while cherry blossoms fall. Yet as you watch the parade, you realize that maybe the cool version is necessary. It's the hook. It's the gateway drug. The teenager playing the video game might start for the action, but they stay for the tragedy. They eventually find the real history. They eventually learn about the white ribbons, and the physical legacy has survived too. You visit a local dojo. The art of Najina Jutsu didn't die out, it evolved. Today, it is primarily practiced by women. It is a sport, yes, with bamboo weapons and protective gear, but the forms are the same. You watch a match. The women are screaming kuai, striking with blistering speed. The etiquette, the respect, the zanchinits, all there. The weapon that was once used to chop the legs off horses is now used to build character in university students. It's a beautiful, peaceful sublimation of violence. The deadliest warrior has become the disciplined athlete. As you walk through the souvenir shops, you see the onna-bugeisha printed on cookie boxes, on keychains, It feels a bit tacky, sure. But then you remember the silence of the Meiji era. You remember the unmarked graves. You remember the shame, and you realize that being a keychain is better than being a ghost. Being a mascot means you are remembered. Being a tourist attraction means you won. The forgotten archive has been blown wide open. The files are everywhere. The female samurai has escaped the censorship of the 19th century and the apathy of the 20th century to become an icon of the 21st. She has traded her iron armor for plot armor. You walk toward the edge of town, away from the festival noise. You are heading for a quieter place, a place where the anime posters don't reach. You are going to the Hangaku Temple. The sun is setting, casting long shadows across the rice fields. The neon lights of the modern world are flickering on, but where you are going, the only light comes from stone lanterns and the memory of a white sash. The legend has been reborn, repurposed, and repackaged. But underneath the gloss, the bone is still there. The spirit of the woman who stood on the bridge is still waiting for you. It's time to pay your respects, not to the cartoon character, but to the person. It's time for the final vigil. You leave the noise of the festival behind. The chanting of the crowds and the thumping of the taiko drums fade into a distant hum, swallowed by the encroaching twilight. Narrow streets of Aizu Wakatsu, heading toward the edge of town, where the forest begins to reclaim the land. The air here is cooler, smelling of damp earth, incense, and the pine needles that have carpeted this valley for 1,000 years. You arrive at Hangaku Temple. It is a modest place, tucked away from the main tourist circuit. There are no neon signs here, no mascot characters, no vending machines selling Samara-themed soda, just stone, wood, and silence. You walk through the gate, bowing instinctively. You aren't a tourist here. You are a pilgrim. You find it under an old pine tree, the grave of Nakano Takeko. It is marked by a stone monument and a statue. The statue depicts her in that final, glorious moment. Naginata, raised sleeves, tied back, eyes fixed on the horizon. But the stone beneath holds the reality. This is where her sister Yuko buried her head after that frantic run from the bridge. Here is a mainstream historical fact. For years, this grave was a secret. In the immediate aftermath of the war, the imperial government forbade the glorification of rebel graves. To visit it was a political act. To tend, it was a crime. The fact that it exists at all is a testament to the stubborn loyalty of the Aizu people. They kept the vigil when the rest of the world ordered them to forget. The pine tree standing over it is said to have grown from the very soil that hid her, a living marker that outlasted the laws of the Meiji bureaucrats. You stand before the stone. You don't feel the horror of the battle anymore. The blood has washed away. The screams have been absorbed by the wind. What remains is a profound, heavy peace. You realize that this isn't just a grave, it is an anchor. It anchors the memory of the onna-bugeisha to the physical world, preventing them from drifting away into myth. This brings us to the final scholarly debate of our journey. How should we interpret the legacy of the female samurai in the modern world? Some scholars view them through a feminist lens, seeing them as icons of female empowerment who shattered the glass ceilings of a patriarchal society with steel blades. Others view them through a tragic lens, seeing them as victims of a rigid code that demanded their deaths for a lost cause. Was their sacrifice a triumph of the will or a waste of life? Standing here, you realize the answer is neither, and both. They didn't fight for feminism in the modern sense, nor did they fight blindly for the patriarchy. They fought for their homes. They fought for the right to choose how they lived and how they died. In a world that wanted to strip them of all agency, to make them passive victims of conquest, they grabbed a spear and said, "No, I decide where this ends." That assertion of self, that refusal to be a bystander in your own fate, is the true legacy. It transcends politics. It transcends gender. It is the universal human refusal to go quietly into the night. There is a quirky fringe tradition associated with this spot. It is said that aspiring martial artists, particularly women practicing naginata, come here before big tournaments to ask for borrowed strength. They leave small offerings, not just flowers, but sometimes their old practice ribbons or broken weapon shafts. It's a warrior's exchange. They aren't praying for a miracle, they are praying for grit. They are asking for a fraction of the steel that kept the hairpin squad standing on that bridge. You look at the statue one last time. The bronze face is frozen in eternal determination. But as the sun dips below the mountains, casting the temple grounds into shadow, she doesn't look like a warrior charging into battle. She looks like a guardian standing watch. This is the eternal vigil. The onna-bugeisha never really left. She just changed form. She exists in the mother, protecting her child. She exists in the woman, working 2 jobs to hold her family together. She exists in anyone who stands between the things they love and the chaos of the world. The armor is gone, the naginata is gone, but the spirit, the gamen, the endurance is woven into the DNA of the culture. You turn to leave. The path back to the modern world is dark, but you aren't afraid. You have walked through the fire. You have seen the castle burn. You have felt the weight of the armor. You carry the white ribbon in your mind now, a reminder that even when the walls fall, the spirit remains. The wind rustles the pine branches, a sound like a soft whisper. It sounds like Susumu advance, but it also sounds like Oyasumi rest. The war is over, the archive is open, the forgotten have been remembered. You walk out of the temple gate and back into the soft glow of the streetlights. The night is quiet, the long watch is done. Wind down now, let the image of the statue fade. Let the stone and the pine tree dissolve into the soft, velvet darkness of your own room. The journey is over. The history books are closed. The heavy iron armor you have been wearing in your imagination. I want you to feel it unlatching. Feel the weight lifting off your shoulders, piece by piece. The chest plate, the heavy sleeves, the helmet. It all falls away, leaving you light, unburdened, and safe. You are no longer standing on a cold rampart or in a burning castle. You are here in the present, supported by your bed, surrounded by the quiet safety of your own home. The only battle you have to fight right now is the gentle surrender to sleep, and that is a battle you are allowed to lose. In fact, it is the only surrender that brings peace. Take a deep breath. Inhale the cool, clean air of the night. Let it fill your lungs, washing away the smoke and the dust of the past. Exhale slowly, pushing out the tension from your jaw, your neck, your hands. Your hands don't need to grip a weapon anymore. They can just rest, open, and relaxed. The echoes of the cannon fire have turned into the rhythm of your own. Heartbeat, slow, steady, calming. The fierce cries of the warriors have softened into the hum of the night the wind. Outside your window, the settling of the house, the white noise of the world, drifting off to sleep. History is full of storms, but you are in the harbor. The water is still, the night is kind. You have walked the path of the warrior, and now you have earned the rest of the traveler. Let the darkness wrap around you like a warm, soft blanket. There is nothing left to defend tonight. The gates are locked, the fire is out. You are safe. Drift down into the quiet. Let the story go. Let the silence take over. Good night.